We'll record because everybody has such wonderful things to say. And then I guess I can share the screen. So this screen too, you think? Yeah. So Sergio can see it for now. Got it. All right.
I'm checking, it says double click to enter full screen mode. Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the special Festschrift in honor of my colleague, Paul Stoller, whom I consider one of my mentors, one of my great mentors. I'm Michael Giovine. I'm a professor of anthropology at Westchester University, where Paul taught, um, and director of our Museum of Anthropology and Archaeology. So, a mentor. Oh God, how do I get over here? A mentor is someone who not only advises and trains, but takes somebody under their wing, teaching them the ropes. A mentor inspires one to be who you are and be that well. You can just stick it in the words of St. Francis de Sales. We all have our mentors, and in the field of academia, they are often considered so formative to one's career and theoretical way of seeing. Former students attempt to father of American Central. But as you can see, Paul actually doesn't figure into this pedigree, which is constructed through formal mentorship. As with all pedigrees, it shows the limitations of kinship elicitation when looking solely at formal descent. And the true value of this is really to spark conversation, reflexivity, and consideration of all those who have impacted one's formation in such significant, if informal ways. Indeed, it's important to understand that each of us moves through their career and intellectual development with the help of informal mentors, people who inspire, who guide, who serve as an iconic personality around which a mentee models himself and his behaviors. Having spent the entirety of my teaching career at Westchester University with him, Paul's clearly that for me. He showed me the practice of that for personal of seeing key undergrads and meaningful pathways that collaboration, as much as I see this. He also told me to take risks, to see inspiration in all facets of life, my own as much as in the research subjects. And from the papers you'll be hearing, Paul has certainly been an inspiration to many as an ethnographer of West Africa, theorist of sensory engagement in and of this world, a master of wordscraft capable of waking the spirits in the upper levels of the Songhai heavens, as much as in those of his readers of his memoirs, ethnographies, and blogs. And he's done that extraordinarily, amassing a wealth of informal mentees throughout his life as he now travels the world, not only giving workshops on writing, on sensing, on healing and well-being, but also sitting with his audience and students, sharing drinks and meals and maybe other stuff too. All right, listening to them and telling them stories. When we share food for the same bowl and selecting the same spirit, how we became father and son, Paul writes about his mentor on Genetongo. For all of this, he's been honored with the highest of awards, the Anders Riis Prize in Anthropology, our discipline's version of the Nobel Prize given by the King of Sweden in 2013, among others. No doubt you've all come because of a particular facet of Paul's life, his public anthropology, his work on sustainability and well-being, his deep knowledge of African spear possession, his path-breaking contributions to sensuous and sensory anthropology. I'm sorry, this is really weird. This can't see all my slides. Many, like several in our panels, have commented that they felt they knew him closely before interacting with him personally, a powerful outcome to his equally powerful vocation of evocative writing. But to be on the same page, I just wanted to briefly paint a picture of Paul's life and career as befitting an introduction discourses Festschrift. So currently professor, currently professor emeritus of anthropology at Westchester University, where he taught for 4 decades. Paul is known for his work among the Songhai people of Niger and West Africa. His many acclaimed monographs and edited volumes, as well as his courses, examine West African and urban culture, religion, rituals, well-being, and visual anthropology. He received a BA in political science from the University of Pittsburgh in 1969, where he also studied philosophy and journalism. Upon graduating, he joined the Peace Corps and was stationed in Niger, teaching English, a formative experience that led him to pursue first an MA in linguistics at my alma mater, Georgetown University, and then a PhD in anthropology at the University of Texas, Austin, 1978. When he returned to Niger, intending to conduct dissertation fieldwork on the Songhai language, thought, and culture, he was captivated by their procession troops that channeled the spirit world through poetry, music, and incantations as a means of pursuing well-being. He immersed himself in this culture. He studied first with a Sorko, a sorcerer, achieving the status of a Sorko Benya. I should have put a picture of Mickey Mouse for a sorcerer's apprentice, but I didn't. An apprentice to a sorcerer, before being mentored by the Venerable Zima, or possession priest, Adamu Genetongo. And there's, that was the sorcerer, right?
That's Sorko Murikata.
Murikata, and that's Adamu. While there, he was further mentored by the French visual anthropologist Jean Rouch, whose ethnographic film on Songhai spirit possession, Le Matre Fou, is a classic, and was particularly influenced by Claude Lévi-Strauss. Paul is well known for his book In Sorcery's Shadow, a memoir of apprenticeship among the Songhai of Niger, which describes his experience living among the Songhai as an apprentice to a sorcerer, as well as Fusion of the Worlds, an ethnography of possession among the Songhai of Niger, which generations of students at Westchester and elsewhere often read. He'd return to Niger frequently while also simultaneously teaching at Westchester, integrating his research into his classes. In fact, we'll hear about this in one additional invited speaker today, who is one of our former students, Erica Walters, who's going to come in a second. Right? Stoller's life and fieldwork shifted dramatically after a series of illnesses, first in Niger, where he was told bad magic was being cast on him, and again after a cancer diagnosis in the early 2000s, which the Songhai interlocutors attributed to perhaps the same curse. A Stranger Among the Village of the Sick is a memoir about his experience of fusing Western cosmopolitan medicine with Songhai spirituality. Feeling he could not return to Niger, he shifted his field site to the Malcolm Shabazz Market in Harlem, studying West African diaspora and vendors and antique salesmen. Where am I going with this? Oh, yeah. Money Has No Smell is one of several books emerging from this work. His productivity, even though he's retired now, supposedly, has not abated. He recently published, among other books, Wisdom from the Edge, about mentorship and the rather universal human search for well-being. Our students have been so inspired by his work that they created the Museum of Anthropology and Archaeology's exhibition, Surrounded by the Spirits, Paul Stoller and the Songhai Journey Towards Well-Being. While the physical exhibition is no longer up, I know Scott also contributed to that, it lives on as a 3D virtual exhibition. I encourage you to go to this website. It's like Google Maps. You can walk around and click on all the different artifacts and listen to complete oral histories with Paul that a student did, as well as special lectures, including Scott's when he came to Westchester. The author of 27 books, 47 peer-reviewed articles, and 16 encyclopedia entries, Paul is particularly renowned for his unique writing style, having pioneered the genre of the ethnographic novel, readable yet instructive academic work. Such accessibility in writing was ahead of its time, when social scientific texts were still often dense and positivistic. This style, which contributed to the writing culture turn of the 80s, paved the way for the formation of the subgenre of humanistic anthropology. Humanistic anthropology emphasizes the importance of conveying through text, images, and more, the value of human life in all its dimensions, personal, collective, and political, and ethical.
Paul was integral to that movement and collaborated with the likes of Renato Rosaldo, Edward Brunner, Clifford Marcus, and James Clifford. Attuned to the humanistic role of the senses in ethnography, he also has been a major influence in sensory anthropology. The Taste of Ethnographic Things, The Senses in Anthropology, is his best-known work in this field. Several of our speakers today discuss the important role that Paul's sensory anthropology played in their own art and their own work, as it does my own. Suffice it to say that I believe, as a scholar of tourism, heritage, foodways, and pilgrimage in both Italy and Southeast Asia, in which the senses play an outsized role in such affective experiences, the Taste of Ethnographic Things brought to the fore such an important aspect of everyday fieldwork that has long been glossed over in positivistic ethnographic accounts. I mean, all of us anthropologists, and certainly all of us when we're tourists, have been no doubt confronted with an almost incomprehensible onslaught of sense perceptions when first entering into a foreign place. I remember stepping out into the old airport in Saigon the first time I visited Vietnam in the days before 9/11. The hot, damp air hit me like a spectral wall, pushing me back into a swirling mix of honking and shouting, the smell of durian and mom entering my nose as tendrils of some unknown and unseen urban jungle vine. Alone for a few minutes, which seemed like forever, waiting for my friend to pick me up, I got a little scared. This sensory alterity emphasized in my mind my own otherness. What are they going to think of me, this American, in the days before mass tourism to Southeast Asia? And when she arrived in the taxi, careening to a stop in front of me, I opened the door and out spilled 1960s rock and roll music. So my fear melted away like, maybe like those cubes of ice and, café soda, iced coffee. Yet, did any of this make it into my first book? No. Because like the sensations of smell or taste, which through repetition, one becomes numb to the novelty of it, we often are trained to overlook such mundane things, particularly when they're revulsive, as if talking about them was in some way irrelevant or an embarrassment. My formal mentor, Ray Fogelson, whom I love, advised me to keep a separate diary a la Malinowski to these personal issues, to work out these personal issues. It's the place to talk about how constipated you are, is what he always said to me. He said it many times. Yet in discussing his revulsion of being served the bad sauce in Tillabéri, Niger, Paul reminds us that we should embrace these senses. For not only are they significant and revelatory, they're part and parcel of being. And isn't that the goal of anthropology? To be in and of this world? Paul's career in the last decade or so emphasized this worldly, this worldly engagement when he shifted focus to more public anthropology. He's been a regular contributor to the Huffington Post and Psychology Today, bringing anthropological insight to a non-academic audience through the publication of over 100 articles. These articles, more often than not, comment on serious, singular events in our society, from climate change to ISIS to populist anti-scientific movements. Yet he doesn't preach, but rather transmits. He transmits the wisdom he learned from his Songhai elders. He advocates listening to one's mentors. And indeed, it's one thing to offer novel theories, to train and to advise, and even to inspire. But a true mentor is one who models the behavior that they're advocating, who lives it, who shows it. He advocates and practices slow scholarship, a commentary not on the alacrity with which one pumps out scholarly texts or grades papers, because Paul certainly does it faster than me in both of those, but because he's certainly quicker than me. He is certainly quicker than me. But taking one's time in not only observing, but sensing, but being in the world, of calling upon the lessons we've learned, of paying attention to the wisdom from those who came before him and putting them into new practices. This is important in our discipline of anthropology more than ever. In practicing slow anthropology, he writes, we recognize and debate the foundational contributions of our disciplinary elders. However, it's also an invitation to participate with new forms of representation. He also put these lessons into practice in his own life. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he listened to his ancestors, from his Jewish kin to his doctors to his Songhai teachers. He prayed, he underwent chemotherapy, he even engaged his doctors in Songhai ritual healing practices. Yet he also thought about and tried to practice to the best of his ability to the best of his ability, the Songhai ideals of well-being, one in which a person views illness as a disease instead of exclusively trying to fight it, to understand that illness is a natural, albeit difficult part of life that one must learn to live with and adapt to, a process that can ultimately lead to a stronger sense of self and a deeper understanding of his existence. This is undoubtedly a hard thing to do, coming from our cultural ideals of biologizing health and medicine. I don't know if I could do it. Yet he paid attention to these messages in the most visceral way possible, understanding the social as well as the physical and spiritual nature of illness and well-being. This was revelatory to me in my own life, in my own struggles as being a social scientist and also a practicing Catholic, and in studying for over a decade pilgrimage, miracles, and saints. As a practicing Catholic, I struggled in graduate school with, which is funny actually to think about, but I struggled in graduate school with making sense on the one hand of alternate phenomena such as spirit possession. I mean, how could that be real? And actually, shouldn't say it, but when my mother-in-law, who was a very Catholic person, saw Paul's exhibition, she didn't want to look at it because she said, spirit possession, it's the devil, it's this, So, how can that be real, or is it bad, or whatever? And on the other hand, in being able to cultivate my faith while also believe in the socially mediated dynamics of ritual. I even went to confession over it, which I did. My decades-long research has been on pilgrimage to the 20th century Catholic saint and stigmatic Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. I lived in his hometown, which is also that of my ancestors, and traveled with Italian and Irish pilgrims for whom Pio is the most prayed to saint, more than Jesus, Mary, and St. Francis. Pio is immersed in supernatural phenomena, from the stigmata to bilocation and from knowing your sins before you confess them. And the Irish especially have a close devotion to his fingerless gloves, they call the mitts, or gloves that covered the wounds of the stigmata that he suffered for over 50 years of his ministry. They're believed to have miraculous curing powers, and I've collected well over 100 oral histories of people describing the feeling of the energy coursing through their bodies when they place the mitt on themselves and becoming healed. What to make of that? I'm a scientist, not a theologian. To make matters more complicated, I have a relic of Padre Pio's curative blood, and I'm often called on by people in my parish and elsewhere when they're in need of help. I'm also invited to talk to parishes and Italian-American groups. My most downloaded video on YouTube is a talk I did for the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. It has like 35,000 views, which is a lot for academics, not a lot for, a YouTuber. They asked me for insight on Pio, and on miracles, they asked me to pray to Pio for them. What am I to say to that? I'm an anthropologist, not a priest. When I talk about this in anthropology class, when I explain Stoller's work or culture-bound syndromes, students ask me if I believe them or not. Early on, I tended to just brush them off with, it's irrelevant what I believe. But the more I talked with Paul, the more I read his book, the more I learned about, Paul's work, I came to embrace this cognitive dissonance. Now, my favorite student evaluations are those that say, I can't tell if Dr. Giovine believes this stuff or not, which I think is it's a great student evaluation. Indeed, Paul has taught me through his writings and his own modeling that we should take these realities seriously, that it's possible to see the world through multiple and different perspectives, and that we are limited in one way of knowing, so we must listen deeply to others. In fact, that's the role that culture plays in our lives. It provides the realm of possibilities open to us, but by doing so, it obscures others. This obscurity doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't exist. This is a lesson. I recall, and I often recount to my students, this is my last story of Paul, and you've all heard it before, the story of Paul's introduction to sorcery in the spirit world, when his first mentor took him to the countryside to search for a spirit that wandered away and it didn't come back to its medium. Suddenly, this healer guide stopped. Shh, see it? It's right there. Paul looked incredulously. He didn't see it. Then his mentor said, you look, but you don't see. You hear, but you don't listen. You touch, but you don't feel. It'll take many years for you to see, listen, and feel as we do. This is a lesson Paul gives us, not simply for ethnographers, but for all of us. Being able to switch your senses, to understand that there's a cacophony of sensory impulses in this world, and by doing ethnography and immersing oneself in cultures, you're priming the senses to see and listen and feel differently. It's a lesson not only in responsibility as a teacher and an ethnographer, but also in responsibility, which I think a number of the people have taught or will talk about. The ability to respond to the myriad mysteries and ways of seeing and being in this world. It's also a message for life and well-being, and I think that's really what true mentorship is. So thank you, Paul. Thank you for your wisdom that I will try to carry with me as you have carried on for your mentors, and especially during those complex and perplexing ways of life. So thank you very much. All right. Does anybody have the thing up? Do we know who's up next here?
I will. I'll go next.
Okay, so let's pull Conerly's up. And I'll share the screen so everybody can see it's very difficult. It's like weird because it comes up here, but it doesn't come up there. And, maybe it'll come up for you, but I think with the screen sharing, there's kind of an issue. But... You want it? I don't know what 2 is. Now you're the same one? All right. It's different than when I did it. So if you go like this. Oh my God. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for inviting me to share the celebration of Paul's life work and his own way of living. He's inspired me, and he's been a very strong mentor for me for my entire life as an academic. So I think you'll see about this as I go through my own paper. The talk I'm giving is A Soothing Voice or a Hot Slap, Sensory Intimacies with Spirits in the Sahel. When I walked into the Tandoori restaurant at the slightly shabby tourist camp motel, I saw just one person, a young man with long black hair. He was sitting at the counter. He was animated, speaking Hindi rapidly, seeming to be excited about telling his waiter something important. I slid in next to him and I ordered brown tea. And as I took the first sip, the man started laughing hysterically. And I realized that it wasn't tea, it was a brown beer called Gulder, which is common in northern Nigeria. And he was still cracking up and he said, I have green tea. And, he kept on. And so he had a teapot too, but full of green tea. We were in Kano, Nigeria, an ancient walled city, major hub on the trans-Saharan networks, but in an area for tourists, and it had hotels and small antiques markets. In 1999, at the start of the implementation of Sharia criminal codes, within a day, everything had been recoded like this. And things were continuing. In any case, the man introduced himself as Ahmed, and the two of us sat back drinking our beers. And he asked me at one point, why did you come to Kano? And I told him I was interested in Islamic and Bori healing. And as soon as I mentioned Bori spirits, he said, oh my God, it's happening to me. And he said, a spirit is coming in the night. When I sleep, she comes. 2 days ago, she slapped me across the face so hard, I fell out of bed. I was confused. I felt the burning hot slap on my face, so I got up quickly to look in the mirror. I could see the red imprint of a hand on my face. Such sensory experiences with spirits are common across northern Nigeria and the region, but Ahmed's fear about the spirit's intentions and the effects were also interlaced with worries about what people would think of him, an Indian man, if they knew the spirit was bothering him. Xenophobia and prejudice against people of Indian descent had dramatically increased after the 1995 to 1996 mass spirit possession of secondary school girls with a new symptom of dancing like they do in Indian film. This mass possession spread from girls to women and boys and men, and it coincided with one of the largest meningitis epidemics in Nigerian history. Today, I want to talk with you, I want to think actually with Paul Stoller about Ahmed's situated experiences with the aggressive spirit and to follow his critical attention to the material and immaterial sensoria that shaped his own thinking and feelings over time. Paul's groundbreaking research in Niger with Hauka or Songhai people who were possessed by French colonial spirits transformed my own understanding of spirit-human relations and political power and cultural histories that remain vibrant as people embody memories. Rather than read spirit possession as a visual text to be analyzed, Paul urged us to use our own sensing bodies in scholarship, to, quote, tack between the analytical and the sensible, and the, quote, embodied and disembodied logics of scholarly argument. Inspired by Rumi, a Sufi poet, Paul advocated that we, quote, follow our hearts and lend our bodies to the world, to forge rather than sever the interconnectedness of things, to reinforce the seamless fit of the intelligible and the sensible. In my talk today, I'll consider what I've learned from Paul in my 18 plus years of ethnographic research in northern Nigeria about the relations of spirits and humans, both in terms of their relationships and the multi-sensory signals of spirit-human communication that create meaning. The vibrant visceral exchanges of humans and spirits as we take something lively from one another offer critical insights to healing in ways that extend beyond bodies into our environments, as well as social, political lives, etc. They also affect time-space connections, and this is important for the way spirits travel in and across beings and things at a distance, as we sense, perceive, imagine, remember, and move about or in and out in ways that may be habitual and thick with relational affective density, or as in Ahmed's case, entirely new. So as we were sipping our beers, Ahmed said, quote, "I'm not sure, but I think she may be a woman. At first, I thought she wanted to have sex with me, but then she seemed angry. She's been coming for 2 months, disturbing me." He described a rapid shift from in the way that she was contacting him. He said, "She started by touching me on my arm or leg, and then she slapped me so hard on the face, I fell out of bed. It was painful, burning hot." He said, "I've not slept well for 2 months. I feel exhausted and confused about why is she angry with me? What's going on with this?" He was laughing and enjoying his beer, but at the same time he was tense and he was fidgeting. I could tell he was nervous. While some people might question the reality of Ahmed's experience or bracket it as some sort of cultural idiom of distress, Paul's research with Hauka in Niger led him to critique the colonial legacies of empirical rationalism, what John Dewey called the quest for certainty and the, quote, epistemological myths of scientific objectivity. Prior to the affect and ontological turns across fields of inquiry, Paul took the ontologies and experiences of others seriously. He acknowledged their sensory effects, both in terms of how they affected relationships among humans and other beings and things, and the sensory connections or associations that shape epistemological realities themselves. As Paul learned during his failed attempts to extract language from language data, this is one of my favorite stories, from the Songhai-speaking neighbors, the knowledge practices we as scholars use may invalidate or devalue the ontological and epistemological realities of others, explaining away important differences by reiterating our own concepts. "Your questions are no good," they told Paul. They taught Paul humility, how to listen and hear their lives differently. And this is what kind of kindled what Paul talked about as slow scholarship, and really spending time with with the relationships he developed, really deepening his understanding of sensory embodiments and this sort of thing. And also lifelong commitments to people that he's worked with and the places where he's worked. And this is a path I also followed by spending basically my adult life in Nigeria. Ahmed talked with me about his life over a period of years. His family had migrated to Kano in 1985 after sectarian political violence in Gujarat. India had displaced his father, His father then accepted a job at Bayero University in northern Nigeria, in Kano, Nigeria. It's a federal university right outside the mud walls of the old city. Ahmed was 8 when his family arrived in Kano, and they lived in the government residential area. It's a sort of middle to upper middle class where mainly government officials and civil servants and heads of industries live. With other people of this background, Ahmed attended an international school in the GRA, and then he attended Bayero University. He was fluent in Hindi, English, and Hausa. And when I met him, he was in his early 20s and a master's student in computer engineering at Bayero University, attending mosque on Fridays on a regular basis. The spirit touched Ahmed a couple of months after he had returned from a vacation to Gujarat to visit his extended family. He'd never experienced spirit touching nor full possession when a spirit mounts from the host from behind like this, in a carnal equestrian language, rides the host, altering their voices, their speech, their gestures and facial and actions. But he was familiar with these different forms of contact because he had a lot of Muslim house of friends who spoke to him about it, and as well as he'd gone to Malams to consult about his own health issues. Hausa speakers refer to refer to spirits by the Hausa terms iska, which means wind, and inwa, shade, or in the case of astral spirits, Islamic jinn. And they generally describe intimacy with spirits, as Ahmed did, in terms of their sensory effects and the feelings they evoke. And they're especially drawn to people that have strong emotions, and they evoke feelings that move in and out of your body as their shade covers and cools your own shadow. So intimacy with spirits entails a perception that bodies, beings, and things in the world are not distinct, not interacting so much as co-constituting or co-becoming in resonant, visceral exchanges with others, whether desired, unwanted, or even unknown. While Ahmed's experiences never reached full states of possession, or he never lost consciousness or anything, these states of responsibility, to use Karen Barad's term, have time spaces that all fade in and out of each other in a dense range and saturation of emergent intimacies. A cool touch may become a hot slap, in other words, and may become then full possession. And each of these bear their own intensities, their own rhythms, forces, tones, moods, with perduring relational stances and regular frequencies of contact, such as Ahmed's nightly visits interspersed with the unknown, unexpected, and irregular. Ahmed was never sure whether the spirit would come to soothe him and touch him coolly, or to slap him and slap him out of the bed. He became hypervigilant, waiting for her, unable to sleep. The responsibilities of Ahmed's relations with the spirits, their mutual sensory and material discursive effects, were palpable and frightening. Their meaning shifted as he was searching for answers through this journey. In the mid-1990s, reformist Sufi and Salafi-oriented Muslims began referring to themselves as Orthodox Muslims, drawing sectarian distinctions about groups they deemed to be true Muslims and those that they considered marginal Muslims or even pagans. They used that language. Bori and non-reformist Sufis, they claim, were all devil worshippers and misguided Muslims who disregarded the boundaries that Allah had created between the world of humans and the world of spirits. When the loudspeaker preaching they were doing and the mass spirit exorcisms failed to clear spirits out of the city, they began cutting down trees because that's where spirits like to dwell. And so they were also Bori and non-reformist Sufis were telling me they were having to communicate with spirits from India and Lebanon and the Sudan because non-local spirits started moving in faster without the windbreak of the trees that had been cut down. So after, with this kind of dynamic going on, political dynamic, Ahmed felt a lot of worry. He said, I was worried all the time that somebody would accuse me of calling spirits from India to harm people. He said, I might even be thrown in jail or beaten. So Ahmed consulted Malam Umar, who was a Sufi Quranic scholar healer who used meditation to visualize and communicate with spirits, unlike the reformist Sufi and Salafi oriented Muslims who are performing mass spirit exorcisms, threatening and beating spirits who refuse to to even talk or leave the body of the host. Malam Umar, he meditated and he helped people to identify and locate the spirit who had slapped Ahmed, so he might make amends with the spirit. He said, "You have angered a spirit," he said, "but not a spirit of this region. This spirit is in India. You've done something to harm a spirit there. If you want relief from this problem, you'll need to go back to India, to the place where the offense happened." Now, this idea of locating the place of contact between spirits and humans is central to Sufi, non-reformist Sufi and Bori practices. It's really super important because spirits travel widely, and yet the site of this kind of original transgression is where things kind of jump off. And what happened, how they negotiate that or deal with that really makes the difference in terms of the relational quality moving forward. And so Malam Umar wanted he said, "You have to go back to India. You have to make amends. That's the only way out of this." So a month after I met Ahmed in the Tandoori restaurant, I saw him again in the same place. He traveled to India, as Malam Umar had suggested, through meditation. Malam Umar had visualized this mahogany tree where the spirit was sitting next to, under this mahogany tree. And he said, if you can find this site, then you can make amends to the spirit. And so Ahmed went to Gujarat, found a mahogany tree, and he realized this was a site where I almost ran my motorcycle into the tree and almost hit the tree with my motorcycle. And he said, I realized at that moment that I had harmed the spirit who was sitting under the tree, and I had almost killed myself and also killed the tree too. And so he did make amends. He apologized to her. And then he said after he came back to Kano, he never had any more contact with her at all. She never came to visit again. He said, "I feel lighter. Before I felt tied to the spirit and to her anger. Now I no longer worry." He felt it was a sign of forgiveness. Now, before I end, I just want to briefly say a couple of things, point to the critical entanglements of ethics, ontologies, and epistemologies in Ahmed's story, and what a lot of people refer to as our pluriverse, or a world of many worlds. How we negotiate the kinds of entanglements that I've talked about will shape future research and practices of healing. In Kano, Bori and non-reformist Malams and the Malams who claim orthodoxy have adopted different ways of knowing spirits and relational stances, ways of being in the world and acting with spirits. Yet, as Isabel Stinger says, the way a practice diverges characterizes not its difference from others, but the way it has its own world mattering, the values that commit its practitioners, what they take into account, and how. Bori and non-reformist Sufi ontological practices of living with spirits and protecting their shady trees, cool, clean water, rocks, and holes on the one hand, and reformist Malam's adherence to interpretations of the Quran that require separating spirits from human life, even to the point of cutting down trees, differently affect the intermingling of intimate relations, shared ecologies, and political power. So who do we protect? Who do we trust, to protect our health and environments? Who belongs to our communities and shared ecologies? How do we solve problems collectively in the pluriverse? By choosing to follow Malam Umar Sufi's path and the poet Rumi's meditations on life, which Paul also felt compelling in his own recovery from cancer, Ahmed followed his heart and lent his body to the world to forge, rather than sever, the interconnectedness of things, the seamless fit of the intelligible and the sensible. Like Paul, Ahmed traveled the distance with his spirit and made amends to her. He also learned to peacefully cohabit and live together with others in shared ecologies and environments. Okay, thank you.
That was great. Thank you. All right, next up is Scott. And then Sergio, you're on deck, so just
Good. I'm here.
okay. Let's get Scott's up here. Oh, wait. You actually see it. I don't know what mine did. Okay.
So I just use this to.
Yeah, just go.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Paul Stoller and many prominent anthropologists and social scientists,
Just to make sure.
including the people I've mentioned on this slide, have meticulously documented that people of Niger and northern Nigeria are surrounded by spirits across Songhai, Zarma, Hausa, Maori, Fulani, Tuareg, and other local ethno-linguistic contexts. Nigerians and northern Nigerians have for generations acknowledged the reality of spirits and the importance of maintaining harmonious, balanced relations with spirits for personal and community health and well-being. This balance is currently being disrupted by intersecting precarities, including climate change and deforestation, almost daily lethal attacks along Niger's borders, and the economic, political, and security chaos that ensued after the coup d'etat of July 26, 2023, and the intensifying suppression of human relations with spirits. Some Nigerians and northern Nigerians attribute the multiple hardships they're facing to the ghosting of spirits. I'm using ghosting in the American vernacular term of abruptly breaking off a relationship. So my paper draws from my own ethnographic experiences with spirits in Niger over 37 years, as well as the literature developed by Paul Stoller and others. Balance is the key to individual and community well-being, especially in this part of the world. Nigerians recognize that individual well-being is multidimensional and involves harmonizing physical vitality, mental clarity, emotional stability, social connection, and spiritual grounding, either through Islam or through balanced relations with spirits of local religions, or both. If any of these is out of balance, the others will be thrown off balance. Balance is the key, including balancing complementary oppositions such as agency and fatalism, but especially hot and cold. People across Sahelian ethno-linguistic groups recognize that balancing hot and cold is essential for individual and community well-being. These are naturalistic forces, though they can be manipulated and influenced by spirits. Nigerians and northern Nigerians classify anything and everything as hot or cold, including food, illnesses, people, spirits, social situations, and even whole countries and historical eras. The most ubiquitous illnesses in the region are attributed to heat-cold imbalance. Harmonizing hot and cold involves pursuing and cultivating the aesthetic accomplishment of the cool, as brilliantly described by Robert Ferris Thompson. Thompson found that across West African cultures, coolness has to do with transcendental balance and entails control, having the value of composure in the individual context and social stability in the context of the group. Coolness is desired not only in times of stress, but also in times of pleasure. Thompson's insights reveal that hot-cold balance is both an individual and community matter. Niger is out of balance. It's in crisis, or the way that many local people would put it, it's too hot right now. And it's getting worse. Nigerians today face intersecting precarities, including ever-present grinding poverty and endemic hunger, climate disruption, terrorism, and the chaos that unfolded after the coup d'etat in July 2023. This concatenation of threats to individual and community well-being has intensified disruption of productive relations with spirits and resulted in significantly diminished access to traditional medicines. So I'll review each of these in turn. Climate disruption. The deforestation of Niger, and we've already heard a bit about the importance of trees and spirits from Conerly. This deforestation due to global warming, the reliance of most Nigerians on wood fires for cooking, presents a massive problem for human and environmental health and balance, and a crisis for the health of spirits, many of whom live in trees. Some Nigerian traditionalists attribute the multiple crises facing the country to spirits who are angered that they are being neglected and displaced from their homes, and express concern that the loss of trees also means the loss of medicines, since all trees are believed to have certain parts that have healing properties. Climate change and deforestation have severely disrupted rainfall patterns across the ecologically fragile Sahel, presenting difficult challenges for farmers and herders that have also exacerbated violent conflicts between them in recent years. 37 years ago, when I first visited Niger, rainy seasons reliably began at the very beginning of June. In recent years, rainy seasons have not begun until mid-July and have included increasingly violent storms that have led to large-scale flooding and significant loss of life and property. It's never used to happen. Jihadist gangster terrorists. Later on, I can explain why I use that term if you like. Niger, except for two Tuareg rebellions, one in the 1990s and one in the 2000s, experienced peace from about 1900 until about 2010, despite the brutality of French colonial rule and the challenges of building a new independent country. Peace was disrupted with the rise of Boko Haram in 2009 in northeastern Nigeria that included many cross-border attacks in southeastern Niger. More recently, the rise of Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and other competing groups in Mali has led to nearly daily attacks in western Niger. These jihadist terrorist gangster groups sometimes target military facilities, but more frequently they attack mosques, people in their farms, people in markets, people at home. As a result, thousands of Nigerians have been killed in the last few years and millions displaced. In the last few years, few healers have dared to venture into Parc W, Niger's most ecologically diverse and important region in terms of flora and medicinal plants and trees, because it's been overrun by terrorists, jihadists. Then we have the coup d'etat of July 26, 2023. General Abdurrahman Chiani, the former head of the Presidential Guard, seized control of Niger via the coup d'etat on July 26, 2023. He declared himself president of the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland. Familiar sounding term. The military junta of Niger. Thus far, the junta has failed miserably to live up to its name, and Niger has plunged into chaos and isolation. French and US military forces were asked to leave, and Chiani severed diplomatic relationships with France and curtailed them with the US. Niger formed a bloc with Mali and Burkina Faso, who also experienced coups in the last few years and are led by juntas, the Alliance of Sahelian States, or the AES. The AES has withdrawn from ECOWAS, the regional political and economic union of 12 West African countries. Chiani's junta, in my view, is largely clueless about how to run a country or an economy. Niger has long been one of the very poorest countries in the world, and economic deprivation has deepened since the coup. Chiani justified his coup primarily by arguing that he was best prepared to handle the jihadist terrorist gangster threat, but he's been incapable of achieving what he was trained to do. Security in Niger has declined since Chiani seized power. For example, in an analysis published in the Africa Report just last month concluded that Nigerians are 4 times more likely to die at the hands of jihadists than before the coup, especially in the lawless area along the borders with Mali and Burkina Faso, precisely where Paul Stoller did his work. And finally, the long-term and intensifying suppression of spirits. Certain Muslims in Niger have been encouraging people to ghost spirits for centuries. This suppression increased after Muslims became the majority in the 1960s and intensified with rising Salafi-influenced Islamic conservatism since about 2010. Nigerians today are navigating contrasting messages regarding spirits. Some local Muslim scholars preach that spirits simply do not exist, that they are merely local superstitions that should be ignored. Meanwhile, other Muslim scholars acknowledge the existence of spirits, but argue that they are evil personifications of Satan, and therefore must be repelled, exorcised, or killed. New packaged Islamic medicines manufactured primarily in Kano, Nigeria, designed to kill or expel or kill spirits have become the most common medicines on the shelves of Islamic medicine shops in Niger in the last few years. Traditional healers who work with spirits, in contrast, argue that people must negotiate with spirits. They argue that spirits cannot be killed and that threatening or attempting to kill them only inflames their wrath. A wide variety of scholars have commented on the dangers of neglecting spirits. This semester, teaching at my anthropology and religion class, took the opportunity to reread some Durkheim and came across this that really resonated with me. Anyway, he wrote, "If it is true that man depends upon his gods, this dependence is reciprocal. The gods also have need of man. Without offerings and sacrifices, they would die." Durkheim argued that gods and spirits are collective representations of society. But I think this interpretation can be extended. Gods and spirits can simultaneously be collective representations of society and very real, that is, deeply implicated in the health and well-being of people, and vice versa. Adamu Genitongo, Paul Stoller's longtime mentor and renowned Songhai healer, expressed his concerns in the 1970s this way, quote, "Times are bad. People have lost respect for the old words and for the old ways. Our fathers and mothers understood how bad it is for people to speak with two mouths and feel with two hearts. People who speak with two mouths and feel with two hearts anger the spirits of the bush. When the bush is angry, there is not enough rain. When the bush is angry, there is too much rain. When the bush is angry, locusts eat our crops and sickness kills our people," unquote. Adeline Mascalier found that among the Maori in the 1980s, that they were convinced that, quote, "the recent popularity of Islam and the severance of people's ties with spirits underlie many problems that people in Ariwa are facing." The Hausa, Bori, and Islamic healers who Conerly Casey worked with in northern Nigeria in the 1990s and 2000s are also very worried about, quote, "the human-driven climate change and rapid cycling of desertification, industrialization, and urbanization across the Sahel alter the material landscape with stifling heat, dehydration, and industrial chemical smells, which displaced, killed, or harmed people, animals, rocks, and trees, but also spirits and spirit families," unquote. Elsewhere in West Africa, Alma Gottlieb found similar concerns regarding the loss of spirits' habitat in sacred groves were expressed by the Beng of Cote d'Ivoire. My work in Niamey has documented a steep decline in spirit possession troops there. In 2010, 20 spirit possession troops were active in the city of Niamey. Today, only 4 remain. Traditional healers regularly explain to me that ignoring spirits does not make them go away. Rather, it only angers them. So I just have a few concluding remarks about what might be done to help restore balance in Niger. First of all, peace. I don't think any real progress can be made until peace is restored. Environmental policy. Though it is unrealistic to expect policymakers to consider balance with spirits as a priority. However, we could think of nature as equivalent to spirits. Protecting the bush means protecting spirits. After all, spirits typically live in the wild, and everything in nature, especially trees, has healing properties. So I think serious commitment to planting native trees is absolutely crucial to restoring ecological and spiritual balance in the Sahel. At the same time, banning single-use plastic bags would be enormously beneficial to the health of Niger's trees, spirits, and people. So many of Niger's trees and shrubs today and spirits homes are covered with and suffocating from plastic waste. Sewage and drainage systems are choked with plastic waste. Furthermore, the integration of solar cookers is long overdue. People started talking about these in the 70s. The Sahel has no shortage of sunshine. Solar cookers can help protect trees and save women in rural areas an hour or more a day that they now spend collecting firewood. And finally, I think that there's perhaps an opening to restore respect for spirits, an opening that has been, or let me put it this way, there may be an opening to capitalize on the present valorization of local cultures supported by Giovine and the AES as an important part of their movement of independence from neocolonial rule by France. For example, the junta declared Hausa the official language of Niger, relishes ceremonial appearances in secure regions of the country, is avidly supporting the national song contest, Sarkin Waka, as well as local and national wrestling tournaments. The spirits are an integral feature of wrestling in the Sahel. Wrestling tournaments, in terms of time, consist primarily of songs and dances in praise of spirits and rituals that rely on spirits to strengthen competitors or weaken their rivals. Almost all grapplers cover their bodies with protective amulets to protect them from spirits or to strengthen them, to draw power from the spirits. Wrestling is a very much a public affair in Niger, enthusiastically appreciated in person and on television by all segments of the population. Maybe there's space for accommodation, for internal peace between those who want to ghost the spirits and those who understand the critical importance of balanced relations with spirits for personal and social well-being. Thank you.
All right. We're gonna zoom into Poland now.
And Sergio, yeah, here.
Hold-
Hello.
Let me
Hello,
not
the,
share the screen. Hold
Oh
on.
yeah, someone was sharing the screen.
So apparently, I mean, they set this up so that we can hear you, but
Yes. I don't think I can see you, but I can. If you stay there, that would be fine. Like to see somebody, because otherwise I will just see
can people hear it all?
the exit. Can you
No.
hear me? No? They come from your. You can hear me, right? But there is no sound in the hall. Okay.
Oh, there was feedback, and that's why they.
Yeah, I just want to check. Let's see. Yeah, it sounds really far away.
Just put the mic even closer. This is where the.
Okay. Yeah, just so it doesn't show very loud the echo. No, that could be a problem, but
You're gonna
yes.
hold on. Let me try to
Yeah,
put
yeah,
up
sure.
volume all the way, which it is.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to go and run and get somebody to pump in. You're gonna go look. Thanks, Michaela.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
coming out of my computer, but not out of. But it
Yeah,
we're setting it up though.
yeah, but it doesn't come in the hall. No,
Yeah,
so
hold on.
I'm
Let's
like,
see. This
yeah.
Epson.
Where we have to choose Crestron, for the.
Now, try this.
Okay, is it better? No, because okay, again.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah, is it better?
soft. We had to switch it.
Yes.
Here, can you talk though?
Hello. Is everything okay? Yes.
Coming through here
One.
though.
Probando. Uno, dos, tres. Yes? Is it okay?
Wait
Oh,
one second.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, if I just go to sound.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, hello. Yeah, it's like you cannot hear anything, right? This. Well, on my end, the volume is all the way up.
Keep talking.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. It is so bad. I'm sorry.
It's coming out of
Yeah, no.
It's not detecting those.
Yes.
Oh, 1 second, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yes. And
We're gonna just hold on one more second
Yeah.
because it's not detecting the
it's
speaker
detecting the
wire
speaker.
that he put in.
Okay. Yeah, sure, sure, sure. I'm sorry that I'm causing these troubles here, but
We had to get it right because we have several people who are.
yeah. Yes. Mhm. Let me see. Hmm. Let's hope so. Well. Yeah, these technical
I
problems
think
is
he should be here soon. He seemed to know what he was doing. If it's
yes.
more than 5 minutes, maybe
Then we go to
you'll
the other
speak
one.
and then we'll have Sergio do it once he gets here.
Yeah, sure, sure. So then the other person
Yeah.
can jump there.
There,
I can.
who else is, there are other people here, right? For the next session, I think there's one or two that are.
Yeah, somebody can jump. That is not a big deal.
Yeah, you're
In
right.
case.
Most of the others.
Yeah, like just a block.
Oh. Yeah,
We had
because
people from Europe going.
yeah, there's the microphone.
All right, 2 minutes and then we'll maybe.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
It's so hot outside, then you go inside and it's. People want to stretch their legs, we're not gonna pause for the break, I think, after.
Yeah.
So.
I have the mini break now.
Guys, presenting. Two people. Yeah. I mean, I was sharing with the great comments right here. That's why I was almost ready, so I didn't have time to say technology.
Mhm. Okay. Oh, hello.
I will be with everybody else.
Yes.
Will you be together
Hello.
with everybody else going to the restaurant? I'll be.
I can hear you very well.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're on.
Are you
But-
on?
But I'm online too. I'm not there, so I don't know what's going on there.
Okay, David. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because they cannot hear in the hall.
Yeah. I understand. Yeah. What's the sequence? Who's after you? Am I after you or?
After me, it should be who's here? Laurian Bowles.
Oh, Laurian. Okay.
Laurian, yes.
So we're running late.
Yeah.
You're the third one once we get this settled.
Could that be the issue? Like,
Yeah. Hello.
we feel like they're here.
Yes. Hello.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't even going through the DI.
Yeah. So weird
Going through.
because it just goes
Oh,
to
no, I
the
was just
laptop.
talking
No?
to Josh here.
Hello.
But we should be hearing something soon.
Hello. Wait. Oh, hello. No.
Shuffleboard.
No.
Turn it down a bit. I'll kind of crank it here at the source.
Nothing. No.
Sounds like
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sergio, can you say something?
Yes. Hello.
Oh, so that's within. That's within. What are we using? Teams or Zoom? Okay, 1 second.
All right.
Yeah. Zoom. Yes.
That's a setting within Zoom itself, I believe.
Oh, okay. Let's
Yeah.
see.
It could be.
Could you give us a little bit more there?
Yes. Hello. I can hear you perfectly. No problem.
All right. Thank you.
It works, but
Yeah.
yeah, well, not my fault. I thought.
Well, we were
It,
just.
it was something in Zoom, right?
Well, it was probably a Zoom thing. Although I tried all of them, but
Okay.
we'll see. Thank you. Thanks a lot. It's good to do this because in the next session we have a couple more people and
Exactly.
Dave
Yeah.
going as well soon. All right. So Sergio, please.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm not going to make this presentation more technologically challenging by showing the PowerPoint because I don't want it to crash. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I met Paul Stoller, right? How I read first about Paul Stoller. So I read the first time I read a book by Paul Stoller was when I was a PhD student at University College London in 2004. At the time, one of my thesis supervisors, Martin Holbrad, recommended that I read In Sorcery's Shadow, Stoller's first and best known book. I read it in a couple of days. Its narrative was captivating, and the subject even more so, the author's initiation and experience in the world of Songhai sorcery in Niger, Africa. It was an unusual book with the autobiographical genre, which within the autobiographical genre, which narrates Stoller's adventures in the world of sorcery in Niger, while offering ethnographic descriptions of the life of the local sorcerers. In Sorcery's Shadow remind me of Carlos Castaneda's book and his involvement in the world of shamanism and witchcraft, books that I had read when I was a teenager in Mexico, and that was the reason why I went to study anthropology in the first place in Mexico. I'm Mexican, I'm sorry. While the reliability of the information found in Castaneda is doubtful and falls more into the domain of ethnofiction and fantasy, in Stoller's case, the information was part of his narrative was truthful, identifiable, and based on his long-term ethnographic experience. In Sorcery's Shadow was a balm and a great discovery for me. His reading never became heavy, and within his prose, one could glimpse an author concerned with finding his own style and close to literature, actually, but without ceasing to be anthropologically serious and very relevant for discussions, right? It would be several years before I heard the name Paul Stoller again. It was in 2014, during the biennial meeting of the European Association of Social Anthropologists, EASA, in Tallinn, Estonia. Paul Stoller gave a keynote lecture on the importance of sensory ethnography. Along with other colleagues, I attended and listened to his talk. I confess that I had no idea that Stoller worked on the subject of the census, and it was a surprise to hear it. During that meeting in Tallinn, I decided to investigate what else Paul Stoller had written, apart from the autobiography I had read years earlier, and what I had heard about the census that day. I discovered that his work and range of topics were quite extensive, easily more than 10 books at the time dedicated to a multitude of topics. I wondered why so little was known about Stoller outside the Anglo-Saxon sphere. I tried to find out if there was any material translated into Spanish, but my results did not yield any positive data. Stoller's works remained alien to a Spanish-speaking public. He suffered the same fate as other contemporary anthropologists such as Bruce Kapfer, Martin Holbrooke, Thomas Hillan Eriksson, Marlin Struthern, Roy Wagner, just to mention a few, of whom little or almost nothing had been translated into Spanish at the time, 2014. Also, this is not the time to make an analysis of the status of translations into Spanish of anthropological works written in English. It is worth mentioning that there are not many contemporary anthropologists translated into Spanish. In some cases, it takes many years until they are finally translated, like it happened with The Gender of the Gift, which was finally translated in 2024 by Marlin Struthern, The Invention of Culture by Roy Wagner, which was translated many years, in 2019, after many years of being published in English. And in just exceptional cases, they are translated with only a few years of differences, like The Ontological Turn, which was originally published in 2017, and Spanish, the Spanish edition is from 2021. So at the meeting in Estonia, a friend and I found Stoller wandering the streets and invited him to a bar. During that brief meeting, we talked about various topics with him, about the state of contemporary anthropology, about ethnography and his work in Africa. It was a pleasant meeting. At the airport, on the way back to Mexico, I met Stoller once again in Tallinn, and we boarded the same flight to the United States and had time to talk more deeply about his work. We said goodbye, but not before telling him that it was a shame that his books were not translated into Spanish. Perhaps something could be done about it. Then, at the beginning of 2016, I won a research grant from the Fulbright Foundation to carry out an editorial project on the work of Paul Stoller and to teach a course on the anthropology of religion at Westchester University, Pennsylvania, where Stoller worked. My initial idea was to translate a book by Stoller, an ambitious undertaking that ended up becoming only the translation of a lecture of his on sorcery that was published in 2017 in a major journal in Mexico City. But instead, what I wrote was a book in Spanish about his contributions to anthropology. It was not just a biographical book, it was rather an analysis of Stoller's main research themes and their impact on anthropology. That's the book. Some of that is, you cannot see very well because I have the filter, but it's about, it's called In Between Worlds, Entre Dos Mundos, la Antropología Radical de Paul Stoller. In Between Worlds, the Radical Anthropology of Paul Stoller. Then, because Stoller himself has written extensively about his life, his professional and personal motives, reasons for doing the kind of research that he deemed relevant, I intended just to give the reader here in the talk a perspective, the audience, sorry, a perspective that could draw on those biographical writings, but without being reduced to a study of Stoller's life. So my plan of the book was basically to show the different aspects of Paul's works and to show it to a Spanish-speaking audience, right? So then I did that, and it was published in Spanish, and then Paul Stoller kindly came to Mexico in 2018 for the book launching. We had him there also for a film festival when he talked about the work of the work of Jean Rouge, a film festival, and he gave a course on anthropology of the senses and writing anthropology at the Autonomous University in Mexico City. So we had the time to share and so people could know Paul Stoller in Mexico, right? So then we coincided as well in Chihuahua, in the north of Mexico, when we went to a conference together when he also presented some of his ideas about the slow anthropology, about kind of the things that he was writing on public anthropology. And I have had the time to be with Paul Stoller in different venues as well. Just this year, I was I had the fortune to spend 4 months at Erlangen and Nuremberg University, FAU it's called, in a project on alternative rationalities and esoteric practices from global perspective, where Paul Stoller is a fellow. Every year he spends around 3 months working in that project. So we met there again, and we shared a lot of things during 4 months in in Germany. And then I also invited Paul to Poland, where I work now at the Institute of Ethnology and Cultural Anthropology. They were celebrating the 90th anniversary of the institute. So Paul, together with other anthropologists, was one of the invited guests to give a lecture and to talk about his work. So also people in Poland could know his work better, no? Because so far I just know one book that is about his work, written by a Polish sociologist. He wrote that book somewhere in the early 2000s, but just few people knew about his work at the institute. So basically, we wanted to show that. No? So I just want to say something, no, that it is impossible to summarize the value of the work of Paul Stoller. Therefore, there is only, I'd like to focus just on very, very briefly in 2 topics. The first has to do with the impact of his earlier work in the context of American anthropology in the 1980s and 90s. 1980s and 1990s, as Michael mentioned. Interpretive anthropology is key to understanding the content and motivation of reasons for Stoller's most representative works in the period from 1987 to 2000. This period is a very productive time for Paul. He spent writing a lot of very good and interesting books, like the ones that mentioned earlier, Sorcery in Sorcery's Shadow, but also Fusion of the Worlds, The Taste of Ethnographic Things, and Census Scholarship, just to give some examples that here almost everybody has read, right? So we can see also clear influence from Clifford Geertz and the reflexive turn in anthropology, right? However, and this is my point of view, what sets Paul Stoller's work apart from his contemporaries in the 1980s and 90s is that while the reflexive turn were theoretically discussing new venues to do ethnographic research, to include more dialogues, to do something on that, while anthropologists were discussing that, Paul Stoller was doing it, right? He was doing it in practice, right? He put into practice what many American anthropologists were arguing theoretically and discursively, right? Stoller was, from my point of view, never a complete postmodern anthropologist. And his work, because his work has been always grounded in solid ethnographic work. For him, discussing ethnography was not something so important or essential, transcendental. His real concern was to find a way to carry out this type of ethnography in practice. He ended up living in between worlds, the world of academic anthropology and the world of Songhai sorcery. How to bring these worlds together has been a personal quest for Paul Stoller, bringing him to experiment with literature, with innovative forms of writing, and with an existential and sensuous approach to anthropology. Stoller follows the path of one of his mentors, Jean Rouch, taking sorcery seriously, and also he finds inspiration in poets, writers, and art in general. And very briefly, the second topic relates to his committed approach to fieldwork. Stoller is by no means the first anthropologist to have been transformed or converted in the field, but he has one of the first to talk openly about it and the experiential intensity of the weird, the paranormal, the unexplainable. How to describe the impossible, how to put into words the suffering experienced by illness, by misfortune, by the tragedies in life. How to put into paper a story that could capture the attention of a reader in a world of diminishing attention spans. Paul Stoller has spent many decades trying to find his own style, his own way of showing the potential of anthropology, experimenting with genres. It is here that we can definitely characterize his approach as radical in the sense of being rooted in a humanistic and phenomenological view of humanity. Just to conclude, summarizing the development of Paul Stoller's work, it could be divided into 4 stages or 4 phases of his work that I identify. One is the themes of participation in the world of sound, high sorcery, the anthropology of the senses, memory, the body, and spiritual possession. That would be number 1. Number 2 would be his work on wellness, health, illness, and his field experience with African immigrants in New York. Number 3 would be his work of fiction, where the ethnographic and the autobiographical are mixed to account for a novel genre that can be called ethnographic fiction or literary anthropology. His 3 novels are an example of that. And finally, what I would say his current concerns of Paul Stoller, his current phases, would be his role as a public figure in anthropology, trying to bring anthropology as a discourse for a wider audience, right? Beyond the academic context, right? During his trips, his travels, his workshop that he has given in different parts of the world, and I took also in Erlangen, we discover how can we become a little bit better writers when we are writing ethnography, being more experimental, innovative in the way we approach our own ethnographic material, right? And from there, theorize what we can theorize, no? Each of these phases, it's just part of the vast work of Paul Stoller. Together, they form the set of his contributions, not only to North American anthropology, but to the world of anthropology in general. His books are read by numerous anthropologists who have found in them answers to many of the questions of the social sciences, especially related to the mystical world and individual creativity. The importance of the evocative power of storytelling is one of Stoller's most notable recent contributions. How to tell a good story and how difficult it is to do that. How we can transcend the boundaries of anthropology by telling good stories, right? Just to conclude, in the liminal space that is created between the experience of otherness and writing about it, creativity must flow. Paul Stoller has taught us that regardless of the research topic we choose, anthropologists always find ourselves confronted with the existential dilemma of never again belonging to just one world, but to several, where our lives are intertwined with those of other people, sometimes as different as they can be from us and in the most unpredictable ways, where misunderstandings proliferate, but where distances are bridges, build bridges to bring human beings closer together. Sometimes we only understand the meaning of anthropology and our being in the world when that liminality absorbs us completely and there is nowhere to escape. Between the one and the other, between states and opposites, is the core of anthropology's teaching, right? Dancing, being in between worlds. And if there is one of the many lessons that I have learned from Paul is also his very human approach, his human tact, his sensibility, not only in his academic work, but also as a person, right? Very open and honest academic who has given so much to anthropology and also in one way or another has affected many of us and has basically in some way changed our lives, right? In some way in the way we think anthropology, right? So I will leave it like that. I'm sorry, I wanted to show some photos from the different moments that Paul Stoller and we coincided, but I didn't want to mess up with the sound with anything here in the PowerPoint. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right. Laurian, would you like to come up? And then let's see. We don't need any of that, so I'll just keep it like that.
Maybe actually, so they can see you, let me just see if you can.
Camera here.
So I can see her. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna take this off so I don't make too much crackle. Can people hear me okay? Yes. I don't know. Is it working? Okay, cool. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laurian Bowles, faculty at Davidson College in North Carolina. And the title of my paper today is Feel Away, Ethnographic Friendship and Anthropological Futures. In her 1942 autobiography, Dust Tracks on the Road, Zora Hurston lovingly reflected on the maternal wisdom when she wrote, "Mama exhorted her children at every opportunity to jump at the sun. We might not land on the sun, but at least we get off the ground." Inspired by that line, I opened my paper abstract for this session with the sentence, "Paul Stoller consistently exhorts anthropologists to embrace embodied method and sensuous ethnography." And in the time I have today, I want to offer a triptych of through lines that come to mind that chart my own relationship with Paul over the last 2 decades as my academic advisor when he was a presidential appointment at Temple University, a mentor, intellectual guide, and friend. In a 1992 article in Visual Anthropology Review titled Artaud Rouche and the Cinema of Cruelty, Stoller recounts a screening of Jean Rouche's Les Mitrefous, a controversial and drawing visual account of sorcery, trance, and spirit possession, where Nigerian men possessed by Hauka spirits, the spirits of French and British colonials, touch fire, contort themselves, and engage in death-defying behaviors without a smidge of harm. However fleeting and momentary, Rouche intended to display their symbolic seizure of power and Nigerian resistance to oppression. But impact and intent are often skewed around difficult issues, and Rouche was hurt by the film's poor reception at the time. Viewers found it too visceral and too disturbing, and the racist representation of Africans as magical Negroes surely didn't help. Marcel Brial and others went so far as to tell Rouche to destroy the work. He did not, but the film did get banned by colonial authorities after its wider release. Perhaps in defense of Rouche, or cinema more broadly, Stoller's 92 essay argues that the immediacy of film, quote, bypasses the coded channels of language and presents an unsettling array of images to transform the audience, quote, psychologically and politically. Paul is not naive, and like Susan Buck Morris, warns that the proximate visuality of film may also anesthetize us to its cruelty, even as the film is simultaneously successful at, quote, casting aspersions on academic imperialism and compelling intellectuals to reflect on, quote, our latent racism, our repressed sexuality, and take it for granted assumptions about intellectual heritage, end quote. Perhaps the way to the future of anthropology, writes Paul, is to follow Rouche's cruel path and confront the sometimes inspiring and fearsome world of incertitude. And then in the article's conclusion, Paul rhymes with Hurston's mother wit when he soberly and rhetorically states, "The sky is lower than we think. Who knows when it will crash on our heads?" In Black diasporic speech traditions, from African-American English to Caribbean Creoles, to, quote, feel a way or feel some type of way is an expression used by speakers to identify a strong and ambivalent feeling about a person or a series of events. The phrase is often used in casual conversation to indicate an emotional response without specifying feeling. The listener understands the sentiment and knows that the reaction is not joyful or wholly positive. For example, if someone says, "I feel a way when someone enters the room without greeting everyone else," or "I feel some type of way about what happened at that gathering," the speaker is having an intangible and intuitive response and verbally acknowledging, without exacting words, a disappointment, annoyance, or sadness. So 20 years ago, yeah, I was feeling a way when I was a graduate student taking a visual ethnography course, and the class was tasked with watching Les Mitrefous together. Give me the grace of my fuzzy memory, so I can't exactly remember whose course it was, but either way, watching the film was uncomfortable. It definitely made me feel some type of way to see documentary footage of such a provocative ritual. Cultural and psychological resistance against colonial rule, if presented, be damned, I felt some kind of way. A kind of way that's especially jarring in a classroom full of other graduate students, almost all of them white. The imagery was both a distraction and an invitation to consider the ethics of ethnographic presentation, the relationship between observer and the observed, and what role Paul believed anthropology serves in this project of knowing. 2. Paul Stoller met Adamu Janatongo in the 1970s during his early field work among Songhai people in Niger. While studying linguistic anthropology, Stoller encountered Janatongo, a master healer descended from 15th century healers who served during the rule of Soni Ali Bear in the Songhai Empire. Succeeding the Ghana and Mali empires, the Songhai Empire was one of the largest and most influential in West Africa. During his reign, Soni Ali Bear controlled significant portions of the Niger River Basin, institutionalized a state structure, and made Goa the central and major trading hub and center for Islamic learning. So for Paul to sit, meet, and learn with Adamu Janatongo for 17 years is a big damn deal. Stoller describes how, quote, Adamu Janatongo will say that we need more stories, especially ones that underscore human vulnerability, to jolt us from the complacency of form or thought, end quote. Paul spent a lot of time with Adamu Janatongo, sitting, listening, perhaps meditating in the way that John Waltney describes the dry long so much so that he becomes a Sohansi himself. And then when Paul was named the spiritual heir of healing, this is an even bigger damn deal still. When Paul Stoller writes about intersubjectivity as the crux of fieldwork, as in what makes being there an experience of meaning and connection, I would go so far as to say that someone in Niger felt a way about Paul's relationship with his teacher. They felt some kind of way so seriously about their relationship that they paralyzed Paul. So when Paul writes about intersubjectivity as identity and consciousness, this is not an intellectual frolic or an exercise in reason. Intersubjectivity here is not just agreement, mentoring, and affection. It is also affliction, adversity made present by this joint attention and awareness to power. Intersubjectivity is also Paul taking a flight home to save his mobility and maybe his own life. And that pivot leads him to West African traders in Harlem, another relationship of the self and accompaniment with others, replete with delicious sauces, wood carvings with stunning craftsmanship, and intellectual and intersubjective datum. Paul shows what it's like to do ethnography and attends to the aspects of life that rational anthropologists often dismiss as trivial, incidental, or even impediments to the anthropological inquiry. To fulfill the conditions of affective fieldwork in this life world, Paul weds essay to story and narrative to analytic synthesis. His stories unfurl and settle in the creases of lived truths. In his refusal of dry prose, Paul gifts with ethnographies of spirit possession, hope, sickness, and paralysis to remind us of, quote, the irreducible ambiguity of our shared realities. Stoller's long apprenticeship with Janatongo forced him to confront the limitations of epistemologies that regard wisdom of the body. The scholar's task, according to Stoller, is to awaken our bodies to the nature of how we come to know what we know. And to do so, scholars must reject the travails of bloodless language. 3. I learned my way through the sprawling alleys, lanes, and corridors of Accra city center around the same time that Zainab Kedu traveled from Ghana's hinterland to work as a porter in the capital. It was 2007 when Zainab arrived at Tema Station, one of the 3 transit stations that encircle Mokala, the city's largest consumer market. Arriving at the depot in the afternoon, Zainab gathered a medium-sized checker bag from under her seat and began her walk towards the swelling informal settlement of Aglobloshi. An hour after her arrival, and despite her best effort to follow the directions provided by her hometown neighbor who now lived in Accra, Zainab was lost. The dizzying cacophony of sound and team of people moving about were disorienting. The orange haze of dust pushed time against her. Zainab was exhausted from the 12-hour journey, which had included 2 bus exchanges. The 1-hour walk turned into 3 hours of being lost. Night had fallen, and the sky barely glowed from the city's lights. The streets were dim except for the headlights of passing cars. As Zainab rounded the roasted corn cellar for the second time, She also noticed women wearing hijab and speaking Hausa and Dagbani. And these cues caused Zainab to inquire about where she might sleep for the night. Weary and anxious, Zainab struck up a conversation with a group of young women as they walked by. They carried metal basins or large pieces of plywood, which indicated their work status as head laborers. Zainab was relieved when a group of women settling behind a stack of wooden pallets invited her to join them for the night. She introduced herself to the fellow migrants from northern Ghana, and a wave of relief washed over her when she was offered some food. It was Zainab's first trip to Accra, and she was grateful to not have to figure out dinner after having been lost. She didn't have a cell phone, but one of the women, Amina, directed her to the nearby call center to notify her family about her safe arrival. As she escorted her, Amina warned Zainab not to trust the generosity of strangers. Although in her late teens, Zainab had never slept in the company of anyone who was not a close relative. After calling her mother, who thanked Allah for her safe arrival, and realizing that she was now prepared to sleep outdoors, under the stars, with a group of strangers, Zainab was terrified. With no option to heed Amina's warning and too weary from the 500-mile trip, Zainab took her chances with the 7 women who agreed to let her squat with them for the night. Zainab spoke 3 languages and heard each one less frequently on her southward journey to the city. So her ears perked up when she heard a familiar tone and tenor as she was entering the woodpile. A conversation was underway. Someone was chiding another for inviting her to their sleep space. And as Zainab stepped back inside, she had to pretend not to hear the exchange. Instead, she copied what everyone else was doing and spread a cloth on the ground. She wedged her bundle of clothes underneath her sore back and tucked her flip-flops between her thighs and inside the folds of her ankle-length skirt. Determined to find her neighbor the next day, Zainab fell asleep with a mix of fright and gratitude. The next morning, when she awakened, all the women were gone, and so were her shoes. Her remaining bundle of clothes, still tucked beneath her, was a small consolation. Now barefoot, Zainab gathered up her things and stepped from behind the stack of plywood to resume her search. She wound through the maze of the onion market, through the sprawling waste piles of agloboshi, until she found her neighbor who had worriedly stayed home from work to await her arrival. The woman immediately sent someone to buy Zainab another pair of flip-flops while giving her something to eat. Exhausted again, Zainab slept several hours in the lean-to her neighbor rented for her. And the following day, just before dawn, Zainab fetched a bucket of water for her morning ablutions, picked up a slat of plywood, and followed her neighbor to join the thousands of women who transport goods through the pedestrian labyrinth of Mokala Market to begin her new job as a head porter. Over the last 15 years, I have often listened to Zainab share her arrival story. In a 2013 retelling, Zainab chuckled at the aptness of the Call Mama Communication Center, where she did indeed call her mama, who thanked God for her safe arrival. When Zainab shared her story in 2018, we sat in a corner table of a restaurant just around the corner where she had slept on that first night years ago. Zainab no longer porters, but runs a pop-up center to babysit women porters who want relief from carrying their children on their backs while they carry goods across market. Zainab's now calm composure belies the fright that punctuated her voice a decade earlier. The first time she talked to me about coming to the city, she was only a few months removed from her initiation, and her story then focused on the persistence of mosquitoes and the cold fear she felt from being so far away. Quote, "Here in Accra," she said, "hospitality and accommodation are just not stable. Being from the north got me a place to sleep, but it didn't stop them from taking my things." With her frequent retelling of her arrival story, Zainab skillfully explores a spectrum of emotion, from a sense of belonging to a fear of harm, offering insightful reflections to the interiority of feeling out of place. Zainab unravels the somatic, affective, and spatial registers of what it means and feels like to porter in Accra, and vividly captures how identity and locale quickly pivot to a sense of exclusion and inclusion. Then and now, and like so many porters, Zainab grapples with an irreconcilable difference between her aspirations and the realities of her livelihood. Listening to Zainab over the year, as well as hearing the guidance of my teacher, Paul Stoller, alongside my foray into Black feminist anthropology, theory, and method, helped me to understand the lives of women and how they are intertwined with the racial transcripts of colonialism and slavery, and how porters underscore the widening gap between the rich and poor in Ghana. It is through recalcitrant stories, that their work and my work show how this precarious community, simultaneously hypervisible and invisible, reappropriates public space to provide private sanctuaries while negotiating queer intimacies and solidarities. Black feminist anthropologist LaConte Dill describes Black girls as present-day maroons who not only seek freedom, but also self-determination and autonomy in plain sight. Similarly, porters regularly make decisions informed by circumstances beyond their control, and that is why, with the courage garnered to me from my experiences learning with Paul Stoller, that I was able to choose a novice arrival story as the entree to the foundational theories and methods of my book, Headstrong, Women Porters, Blackness, and Modernity in Accra. The influence of Paul's effort to doubly recast anthropology means that the story goes through phases of retelling and reinterpretation to significantly alter meaning or presentation to emphasize the multiplicities of a moment. With Adamuja Ntongo's guidance, Paul makes a swift break from Cartesian dualism, rationality and reason as primary knowledges, and theory, big T, as the best fit to situate ethnography. When Paul had cancer, it was the wisdom of Songhai sorcery that taught him how to walk confidently in the path of fear and accept adversity as a strength. Similarly, Zainab and porters like her are Cartesian outlaws, women who sell labor instead of goods and use stories to be instructive about what constitutes belonging and social entitlement. While anthropologists have long argued how the West remakes modernity in its own image, and as a rationale for capitalist extraction and accumulation, modernity remains conceptualized oftentimes as something unfolding or forthcoming in Africa. But with their focus on habits, attitudes, and practices, porters, as well as my book Headstrong, explains how the social differences that situate porters as the foil for progress actually miss how Kaye are the vanguard for thinking and feeling away through the afterlives of slavery and colonialism in Ghana. Fieldwork and the array of refusals that these experiences offer generatively haunt anthropology in the present. Because community care, and community work are inconvenient, protracted, and often hard. And in this current age, what Paul describes as slow anthropology, that unhurried approach to human relationships, is the edification and discipline required to maintain hope for a more equitable world. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to a couple of online presentations. First with David Napier. Thank you. And
Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Okay, all I see is Anna. I don't see anybody else. Is that okay?
Sure.
Hi, Anna. I'll give the talk to you, I guess.
Well, you should see, there's a little.
Oh, there's Sergio. Okay, great. Okay, so my paper is called Why the Dead Are Dying of Thirst, and I should begin by saying that I was all set to come down and be with you folks, and a resident gin in my camp in upstate New York decided I wasn't going, so I ended up in a hospital, and I'm just out. So you'll excuse me if this is a little, if I sound a little disoriented, it's because my spiritual life is being upset at the moment because there's nothing more than I'd like than to be there with all of you right now, old friends and new. So the first part of my paper is about self and non-self, set and setting, as we call it, and what is social trust? And I'll try to explain the connection between those. The psychologist C.G. Jung once said that self-fulfillment requires that each of us, quote unquote, make our own experiment. That's more or less the story of Paul's career, as far as I'm concerned, making one's own experiment. Paul and I have been close friends for some 40 years now professionally. That means through most of the major transitions in Paul's work. He's trusted me with drafts of some of his writing and even stood as my best man at my wedding, offering many blessings from what he'd learned from the Sangha and from Adamojeni Tongo in particular. But it's not any one work in his remarkable oeuvre that I want to focus on today. Instead, I want to focus on Paul's disciplinary betweenness, not just his ethnographic engagement or creativity as a novelist or as a path-breaking sensuous ethnographer of taste, and I'm thinking of sensuous scholarship and one of my all-time favorite titles, Bad Sauce, Good Ethnography, or as a cancer autoethnographer describing the liminality of remission, or as a blogger on contemporary social challenges for concerned popular readers of psychology today, and on and on and on. What I more have in mind is Paul's contribution, on the one hand, to the betweenness that mediates what can and cannot be known, and on the other, the betweenness that mediates what can and cannot be said about what we know. Paul and I both, having been magically poisoned more than once in the field, if nothing else, taught us that the key of having a life fully realized is less to know, but to know how to manage the space between what you actually know and what you may never know. That's the social trust part that helps us create new ways of taking extroverted risks with others. What I mean here is that the power of the between is not only about, say, the exchange of sacred objects that might protect one's home, the kind of kula objects famously described by most. It's about Paul and I sitting in a New York coffee shop and randomly opening a book of Sufi legends in search of finding a path and proceeding to the American Museum of Natural History to kneel and bow below the tower that was once Margaret Mead's office. We have a film of that, by the way, and of the mystified museum guards who stood watching. And then on 125th Street, where pirated audio and videotapes were sold alongside African art, or to the Park Avenue Armory show of African art, or possibly to vans in parking lots across the US, where apparently fake art was being sold alongside another kind of art that was offered for free, namely the art of authentic human exchange. Since the first day we met some 40 years ago, as co-Mellon Fellows at NYU, Paul and I have shared a desire for the betweenness of what is certain and describable and what is not, as if both a shared interest in creativity and extroverted risk could turn our mutual experiences on being magically poisoned and by some illness or its treatment into learning about trusting itself as an act of betweenness. Trusting is an act of betweenness. To return to collective experience, this is what Jung had in mind when he said that self-realization had less to do with realizing personal goals through self-confidence and knowing the self, the self-help sort of narrative, than with a successful expression of our values in context. It's our ability to manage our lives socially, to generate trust beyond close encounters with those we know best, that determines, in other words, if the experiment we call life will be fulfilling. Once viewed this way, there are numerous examples of such creative risk-taking in Paul's life and work, but I only have time for one example, and that for me comes from Paul's desire to write about and celebrate the creative vitality of the great filmmaker Jean Rouch. I don't mean here Paul's commitment to writing the cinematic griot, a Rouch biography through the examination of his films. What I'm talking about is the extroverted playfulness of Rouch, how play itself could be magically serious for him. In 1992, my old friend Andre Singer, who was Evans Pritchard's last student and at the time in charge of BBC ethnographic programming, was facilitating experimental film by Rouch that would epitomize Rouch's ideas of docufiction and ethnofiction. The film was called Madame Lo, Lady of the Water, however you want to translate that. In the film, according to DER, the Documentary Educative Resources, we all use archives we use for classes. This is what they say. Quote, farmers Damorelam and Talou are ruined by drought. They meet a Dutchman who introduces them to the windmill. They decide to construct a Dutch windmill on the banks of the Niger to irrigate their fields. This film was about all the story of the meeting of a Dutchman and three Nigerians, between whites and blacks, between North and South, the simple and the sophisticated, in short, the history of the birth of a friendship to whose depth Rouch brings a sine eye. Well, I'd say yes and no. For what the summary does not tell you, a thing described in great detail to me by Andre Singer at the time, is that in order to understand wind farming, the trio plus Rouch actually asked to take a donkey on a jet plane to Holland so they could see how windmills worked. And that in order to be able to see the windmills properly, they would require the use of a very large American 1960s convertible motor car. Just had to be, no question about it. Singer, in other words, took quite a risk, he told me, in trusting and paying for Rouch's big experiment in docufiction, just as Rouch himself had with Damorelam and Talou in Holland. Indeed, this way of co-creating had, of course, been employed by Rouch from really the beginning, and we just heard from the previous talk about Le Maître Fou, so I won't talk about that, and Marcel Griot's outrage at that, who saw Rouch as a kind of ethnographic travesty. But where Griot was the very ethnographer who gave life to the statement I used in the title, "The Dead Are Dying of Thirst," which is what the Sangha often say, Ruch and Paul as well knew that ethnography is about cultivating social trust in co-produced, quote, between places, about building cohesion across multiple relationships, less about self-help, less about actualizing the self through confident affect, than about managing more than one relationship and sometimes multiple and varying relationships with others at once over time and creatively. And of course, this is the whole narrative of West African trading in North America, which Paul writes about so eloquently. For social trust to emerge, in other words, building alliances and nourishing them is critical. For social trust is about creating common cause and mutual purpose, even sometimes, especially perhaps, with those holding quite different views than our own. A critical message for today, no doubt. It's about tempering uncertainty by sharing. It's about social orienteering, and it's about finding beauty and satisfaction in these things. In short, social trust is about achieving a life fully realized within the world as we find it, and about finding joy, not fear in the unexpected. In this sense, social trust is not at all like thinking about the self. If anything, it's about non-self, the other. And if about help at all, it's about a kind of non-self help or other self-help, in which the success of our experiment depends less on our narcissistic needs than on our accepting and adjusting to things possibly outside our direct control, or at least not entirely within it. That's because social trust demands extroverted competence, a skill at negotiating, not only succeeding in close quarters with our loved ones, with loyal allies, or with those who cajole us and coerce us. Social trust is about managing interactions both in proximal terms, but also at a distance among those we know less well, but that others know we know better. Social trust then is about being in the world, a different framework for exploring self-knowledge, a wholly different set of skills. It's the unknown becoming knowable need in each of us, a thing requiring bravery, exploration, since uncertainty is endemic to things we know less well. Instead, Paul's kind of creative risk asks for acceptance, for patience and commitment, since uncertainty can leave us yearning for things simple. Viewed this way, it's the power of the between that's the big challenge. So here's a personal example very briefly before I finish. Your Family Ghosts is called. Sarah, my maternal grandmother, lived well into her 90s and died when her mental faculties were firmly intact. But when I was a child, she confused my name with that of my cousin, Michael, first cousin, especially when she got cross with one of us. Even as Michael and I stood before her, she could not differentiate one from the other. As a young grandmother in her mid-40s, this confusion caused laughter from her grandchildren, as it might today some clinical concern. But for Grandma Sarah, it was not her failing to distinguish one person from the other that was troubling, nor was it the genuine confusion of early dementia. Rather, these were behaviors and shared conventional understandings about those behaviors that one of us embodied. What she was responding to was not David or Michael, but the power of well-known ways of acting that our family shared deeply in our betweenness. She trusted, that is, her intuition about what came about as a familiar, a cultural way of acting embedded deeply within our patterns of relating, which makes me think about why my fall took place this week. A thing the traditional people across the ghosts call family ghosts. What bothered her, that is, was less that we two boys were again misbehaving than that a recognizable, if mischievous form of acting in our family relations was again emerging. Mascherata, she would yell out in her peasant Sicilian. Masquerade, which was always followed in dialect by mia fata, my spirits, as in come fata, how you misbehave. So this masquerade was in our bones from ancient times. And of course, this is the thing that we attend to in Days of the Dead, Feasts of Fools, Fastnacht festivals, and so forth, where the dead who are dying of thirst are satiated, and where we come to terms with a long ancestry that Adamo Genitongo represented for Paul and for the deep learning that he received from him. Now, I'm pretty much out of time, so I'm going to, like many others, I'm going to skip to the very end. But I do want to say a couple of words about very briefly about a third point that I'd like to make. And that has to do with the whole question of trusting at your margins. Sometimes biology holds interesting clues about how groups of living things relate. Back in 2003, when I published The Age of Immunology, most thought that viruses invaded us pathologically. It would take some years before regenerative medicine and stem cell research would accept that viruses are just information that our cells bring to life, be that information dangerous or restorative to get to the extroverted risk. But the Balinese had taught me these things nearly 20 years earlier in 1984, right after the AIDS crisis emerged. The idea that a living thing can bring to life all sorts of information, or a thing be made living, and use it either to restore us or to do us in. Indeed, because we share that information amongst ourselves in groups, the condition, the health of our collectivity also is relevant to where we get that restorative genetic data. As cell biologists know well, you need lots of information exchange for a virus to mutate into an all-out epidemic that has impact on the human herd. A growing cell colony replicates, subdivides, and differentiates from its center, whereas an aging one dies from its center, meaning that its growth is more dynamic at the edges, even if life there is much more at risk. You can tell I'm talking about today. Indeed, it's the betweenness of the colony and the exchanges of energy there with the periphery. It's the exchanges between the center that matter, and it's also the same socially. If, as today, the colony is dying at the center, the need at its periphery for innovative thinking is all the more important. If life at the periphery becomes too monastic and cult-like, it needs to attend to its center and what can be brought back from its vision quest. It's the power of the between, to quote Paul, where what we anthropologists call family relations matter. I'm almost done. Family relations are, in this sense, cultures of practice in which bonds emerge that test the limits of social trust. Though your biological family may be your first experience of surveillance, it's the imitating that creates consensual life. For humans are social animals that must follow one another for bonding to succeed and for trust to emerge and grow. As such, social trust encapsulates and captures not only the uncertainty of what happens time and again amongst people every day as they try to build cohesion to secure what is normal, it also captures the need to know how resilient our relationships are and how large our networks of trust can become. Maintaining social trust, then, is not just a matter of measuring how many friends a socialite can balance. It's about how our cultures of practice unfold over time. That is, the resilience, not only on a weekend, but even diachronically, meaning over time or several generations, as Paul's work with Adamo Genitongo made abundantly clear long ago. The narration of lineages over time is critical, for deep time is not a lifetime. And I think I will end with that because it's been a great pleasure for me to be a friend of Paul's for such a very long period of time. And I think these are just a few of the ideas that I believe have occupied Paul for so many of those decades. And I thank him from the deepest part of my heart for his exchanges with me.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It was really great. Really good paper. Fiona Murphy is up next, also zooming in. We're going to do I'm going to make an executive decision. There's going to be a slight change. So after Fiona will be Anna. We do have in the program Giovanna Parmigiani, who can't be here, and she sent a recording, and we are over time as it is, and I'm afraid of crashing things. So I think we'll see if there's time at the end for that. Okay.
Super. Thank you, Michael. And hi.
You're the second to last, but no, we're all gonna get to that. Okay, Fiona.
All right, thank you. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hi everybody.
Yes.
I'm actually going to read a poem for Paul, and it's called "How to Call the Sun," and it's a poem in 10 fragments. And I'll just begin, I guess, with the dedication. I met Paul Stoller first as a name on a spine, then as a voice, and finally as a presence. All patience, all light. Years later, on the Atlantic edge of Ireland, he came to our field school and stood beneath the rain-soaked cliffs of Dingle, chanting the sun back to us. In that moment, the field became something else, tender, trembling, alive. This poem is for that day and for the man whose work has taught so many of us how to live inside wonder, to taste, to listen, to remain porous. Invocation, the light that listens. Dingle, the rain coming sideways, a silver handwriting against the cliffs. You stand in it. No coat, no hesitation. Hands raised like someone remembering a language. You say, let's bring the sun. Your voice part Songhai, part sea wind. We laugh, half believers. Then the light breaks, as if the world has been listening all along. And from that wound of brightness, the field begins again. Apprenticeship to the invisible. You were never only a man who studied magic. You were what happens when scholarship learns to breathe. In Niger, you were told, to understand us, you will have to grow old with us. And so you did. Each field note, another bead of sweat. Each friendship, a kind of spell. Dust clings to your sentences. We taste it when we read. The taste of knowing. I imagine you there again, knees in the dust, recording the smell of smoke, the sweetness of millet beer. You called it the taste of ethnographic things, but it was a love letter to what the mind forgets when the tongue is silent. Fusion, where spirit meets the page. In Fusion of the Worlds, you said possession is a form of conversation. Now I think teaching is, too, how we leave your voice echoing under our ribs. The line between us softens. We carry you home in the breath. The commerce of care. Later, New York, money has no smell. Warehouses of masks. The river thick with stories that refuse to drown. You said friendship was the only currency that mattered. A long economy of kindness, passed hand to hand. Stranger in the village of the sick. Then the body spoke. Pain became syntax. I wanted to live enough to write. I wrote enough to live. We learned that survival could be method, each scar a field site, each breath a return. The alchemy of rain. When you came to Dingle, you brought the desert's patience. The sea recognised it. At the pub you ordered writers' tears. We toasted the sunshine you brought. You said scholarship should taste of rain and risk. Outside the wind took notes in salt. Sensuous scholarship. Write with your hands, let language sweat. Desire and doubt share a sentence. The page remembers touch. Let the field into your prose until it smells of rain. And it does. Our silence wet with wonder. Friendship as method. Two voices, yours and Yaya's, braiding through a warehouse light. Trader anthropologists mirror each other. The world porous. Friendship as ethics, as air. We breathe you in again, again. Between. The interval, the hush between translation and understanding. Home of anthropology. Between theory, tenderness. Knowing, not knowing. Bridge wide enough for students, spirits, strangers. We cross it still. Half in rain, half in light. The sea breathes through its ribs. Edge. How to write through turbulence. You answer by standing again on the cliff, calling the sun through storm, each gust lesson, each pause prayer. Magic is how you move through the world. And we, moving after you, learn to move likewise. Benediction, the field still breathing. Tonight I pour a measure of writer's tears. Outside the sea rehearses its brightness. Somewhere a gull opens the sky. I think of you, your hand slicing the air, your laughter tugging light from the horizon. I whisper the chant you taught us, and the world answers again. Paul, teacher, griot, conjurer of sunlight. What I mean is thank you. Thank you for the heat of your patience, for teaching us how to listen until the field hums, for reminding us that the work is never still, that rain too is a kind of praise. You changed the temperature of the room. You gave us a method made of mercy, a scholarship that breathes, a way of being human that tastes of spice and rain. Even now the field inhales through us, salt on the tongue, drum echo in the ribs, your voice lifting the air. Can you feel that? May the gulls echo your laughter. May every student you've steadied carry forward your song for the sun. And when the sea gathers our words, as it always will, may it scatter them wide, bright, restless, still warm with your hand. And thank you. And thank you, Paul. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you and your work in this world. And thank you, Michael, for organising it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. So, thank you. So the rest of the program is Anna Botkin, Helena Wullf, who's here present, Gina Athena, and then Erica Walters, also who is present. So, Anna, I'll pass over to you. Yes. You're muted though.
Thank you. And thank you. I want to celebrate my dear friend Paul Stoller with a thought about the borders we cross. To live between presupposes that there exist borders. So every border is a human creation, a political choice someone drew on a map. Today, 1 in 8 people on the planet are on the move, having crossed or trying to cross or being forced to cross borders of continents, of countries, of towns because of genocide, of war, epidemics, state violence, hunger. 1 million of these souls are in Gaza, in Palestine, where another 1 million people, by most estimates, are lying dead under the rubble of their homes, their universities, their shops, their hospitals, their daycare centers, their libraries, their petrol stations, their mosques, their schools. And on the other side of the border from that abattoir, an illegal border, artificially created and fiercely guarded by the world's most powerful governments. People in Israel go to school, go to the dentist, go to bars, go to temple, go to concerts, go shopping. Every border is a human creation, and every border we create across requires us to adjust or fine-tune the communal boundary we have around our hearts, the boundary of the permissible. With the genocide that is ongoing in Palestine, we as a human race have crossed into unforgivable territory, and finding dignity from here will be a difficult task. I am a writer, and all of my writing examines our connectedness and explores 2 interweaving meta-stories that make up our human fabric, our penchant for violence on the one hand, and our inherent defiance against depravity on the other. This too is a border. The intricacies of life are shaped within such precarious balancing. We're ecotone creatures, always straddling borders, the gritty membranes that resonate and amplify our most intimate aspirations and frustrations. As an immigrant who was born in the Soviet Union and grew up behind the Iron Curtain, I always have hewn to borders, physical and metaphysical, where hope and fear, virtue and disgrace reach their utmost density, where a most rigid Manichaean impulse to bisect the world into self and other finds a perfect outlet. Exploring borders and boundaries allows for an introspection, questioning, where do I draw my own? As part of my responsibility to perform this examination, I tell stories. I hope that through these stories, I can understand and show why we draw boundaries and why we cross them. Why there are people at the border or inside the border or outside the border hoping for a better life, and why there are other people on the other side of the border trying to keep these first people out or making these people dead. One of my favorite lines from Paul's work is his response to the question, what does it mean to be an ethical anthropologist? Paul said that an ethical anthropologist is one who invests love and loss in the community in which they work. I am a former war correspondent, and my work spans the entire world. I work in the community of the planet Earth. You see now why it is impossible for me not to talk about Palestine, because Palestine today is the utmost litmus test, the unparalleled clarifier of the boundaries that we contain, boundaries of our ethics, boundaries of our compassion, boundaries of our violence, boundaries of our love. Palestine today is creating for us a new map, a map of how we choose to be human from now on. A map shows a relationship between elements in space and implies an observer, you. A map represents our effort to make sense of ourselves in a particular place, and thus it charts our reach for meaning. It is no accident, I think, that the world map entered the English language in the 16th century via the French from the medieval Latin mappa mundi, map of the world, with mappa meaning napkin, cloth, tablecloth, signal cloth, flag, and possibly relating to the Mishnaic menopause, fluttering banner, something soft, a streaming cloth, a flag, an object that flaps in the wind, that shrinks and fades and stretches on a bias. All these connote a kind of unsteadiness. Maps are objects that historically we're taught to rely on, but they're historically unreliable. Is it any surprise then that we fumble as we look for the road ahead? A mapped landscape is always tailored to reflect the cartographer's desire, the way when we say acts of humanity, we mean kindness, though humanity is just as likely to commit atrocities. We map out the world, seeing our own projections, filling in the blanks with imaginary stories or leaving them blank. Some things we don't imagine or don't want to imagine, so we dismiss them. For what is a cartographer? A dreamer of worlds. Storytelling, of course, is also a kind of map making, a kind of boundary setting or boundary adjusting. In the act of telling stories, in the act of demanding that our audience reconsider the way it sees the peopled world, storytellers cross the boundary between the polite and the urgent. It is a perilous crossing because it insists on pushing the boundaries of the audience, the boundaries of empathy, of sorrow, of shame. Like many border crossings, it can be deadly. The Russian poet Osip Mandelstam, who died of typhoid fever en route to a Soviet concentration camp, he died crossing the border between the relative freedom of being a Soviet poet and enslavement-like imprisonment. Once joked that only in Russia is poetry respected, it gets people killed. Israel must respect the hell out of poetry because it has killed more than 300 poets, writers, and journalists in just over 2 years. Even after the so-called ceasefire in Gaza, does Israel continue to murder storytellers. Now, I invite you to consider or imagine that a border is not a place, but a time. Or actually, let us take a step further and think of space-time, or consider or imagine that time is also a country. So more than 2 years ago, we as the human race crossed the border into a country where for more than 2 years, we have been watching Israel kill an average 1 Palestinian child every hour. Where we expect in the morning when we check the news, even despite the ceasefire, to see more dead, mangled Palestinian children, more doctors led away at gunpoint. We have crossed the boundary from the age of the country of people who don't allow a televised genocide every hour of every day for 2 years and counting, to the age or the country of people who do. For so many years, we have been watching human beings turned away from borders. We have been watching human beings deported, children torn from parents, men stuffed into unmarked vans. On this side of the border of our time, of this country of now, which we all inhabit as a human race, such things are now a part of our daily life. And here is where I, as a storyteller, must draw a new map. The origins of genocide in Palestine and of the abysmal mistreatment of migrants and of the climate catastrophe that is devastating cultures and home grounds all over the planet, and of the A-bombs that continue to haunt us 80 years after Hiroshima, lie within the failure of love inherent to the colonialist systems we inhabit. But the systems are not something we are destined to have or abide by. They're not inevitable. They are, too, a kind of a bordered country, something we had imagined at some point, and I believe that we're capable of reimagining this country, this world, in radical ways. I spoke about the boundary of the permissible earlier, and now I want to speak about the boundary of the possible. I am speaking to you in New Orleans via technology from Philadelphia that did not exist in the country or the time where I was born 50 years ago, and maybe you as well, some of you at least. For us to have crossed collectively the border into the land of internet communication, somebody or somebodies had imagined what can lie beyond that border and then made the crossing. Somebody, a human being, had imagined and made possible a heart transplant. Some other humans being imagined and made possible space travels. Our young people are even better at imagining. Look, in a mere decade, they have reimagined gender pretty much all over the world. Facing a great deal of resistance that causes enormous suffering, they are, and we are alongside them, reimagining a world that is not patriarchal, colonialist, and capitalist, a world that does not require the sacrifice of a child an hour to the beast of fascism for 2 years and counting. And I believe that Paul, who continues to mentor so many young people around the world, will agree with me when I say that they are, and we are alongside them if we choose to, remapping a more loving way to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena Wullf is next. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. I read the book In Sorcery's Shadow by someone named Paul Stoller when I was a student. It was a revelation. Here was, amazingly so, an academic story most effectively conveyed through fiction technique. Many times over the years, I have returned to Paul Stoller's work, both in teaching and writing, especially when it comes to issues on sensory engagement and how to compose accessible anthropological texts. Let's listen to Stoller's exemplary description in his field in the Republic of Niger. It is a white-hot day in June of 1987, and the mix of sounds and smells brings the spirits to Adamu Yenitongo's egg-shaped dune-top compound. 4 mud brick houses shimmer in the languorous heat. From under a thatched canopy at the compound entrance, the orchestra plays spirit music. The spirits like this place, drawn by pungent smells, pulsing sounds, and dazzling dance. They visit it day and night. So Hauka possession dance is dazzling to look at. The sound of the dancing is conveyed by Stoller in terms of the patter of dancing feet on dune sand. But what does it feel like to dance? What is the role of the senses? All of them, not only vision and sound, but also touch, even smell, perhaps taste, for the dancers in this dance, in any dance. Key here is well-being and the remarkable ability of dance and movement to evoke well-being. So in this short presentation, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to show how Stoller's work has inspired my research. Firstly, on classical ballet and dance as a transnational career in Stockholm, London, and New York. And secondly, on dance in Ireland and questions of social memory. The aim is to capture how dancers move through their senses. In ballet and contemporary stage dance, the senses are integral both in learning and executing dance steps, let alone in remembering the steps and how to do them. In studios and backstage at theaters, there is a characteristic smell of resin that dancers put on the soles of their shoes in order not to slip. This is mingling with a sweet smell of stage makeup and perhaps the sharp odor of perspiration from moving bodies. As dancers work skin to skin, the touch of each other's bodies is constantly there. On stage, there is also the feel of the heat from the spotlights. Not only the music makes the sound, but in contemporary dance, silent sections and so-called stage sounds of bodies and feet on the stage contribute to the soundscape of dance, as does applause. Vision is the dominant sense, like in so many other contexts, what the dancers see as they dance, how the dance is seen by the audience, ranging from new audience members on one hand to seasoned critics on the other. They watch in very different ways. Dance has mostly been researched as a visual art form, yet sound is clearly crucial, and without touch, there wouldn't be any dance. This is a palpable case of what David House has referred to as intersensoriality, as he makes clear that senses relate to each other. Importantly, they do not only collaborate, they can also be in conflict. Vision, sound, and touch are supposed to collaborate in dance, but it happens that they clash. It can be a mistake in the live music or a step that is forgotten, which breaks the spell of a performance, both for the dancers and the audience. The collaboration of vision, sound, and touch is at stake in a different way in studios with walled mirrors where rehearsals take place. When I was doing fieldwork in the ballet world, it occurred to me that with my background as a dancer, this was an instance of reflections of the self in the other. And as I began observing daily classes and rehearsals with the Royal Swedish Ballet in Stockholm, I sometimes took the opportunity to cast a secret glance in the mirror at the dancers. It didn't take long before I noticed that they were doing the same thing with me. The observer was being observed. The dancers were checking me, who I was, and what I thought of their dance. Later, they told me that they had indeed commented to each other on the fact that the way I was watching them had revealed that I used to dance. As I gradually got to know the dancers, I found myself communicating with them through the mirror, chatting during breaks with mirror eye contact, nodding encouragingly and showing that I was following them attentively during rehearsals. And of course, I saw that they were communicating with each other through the mirror, as well as comparing themselves, even flirting a little bit. The coaches also watched the dancers more or less openly through the mirror. Mainly the dancers observed themselves, though, using the mirror for working out what a step looks like and how it then feels to do it over and over again. You you look and check and see, now the step looks right, and this is how it feels when it looks right. So during rehearsal, the mirror is placed where the audience is seated at performances, thereby suggesting the reactions of the audience and of critics to the dance. When the opening night is approaching, a curtain is drawn in front of the mirror. Now, the dancers have to forget the mirror. Now they have to dance without constantly checking what they look like. This is the phase when they move from technique to artistry. Liberated from the mirror, their steps become more expressive and start telling stories. With the ability to move and manipulate their bodies in far more elaborate ways than regular human movement patterns, dancers can gain a deep sense of pleasure, sometimes even reaching into a state of flow. A peak point when action and consciousness meet. This can occur on an ordinary morning in training, rehearsal in the afternoon, but most momentously in performance. It is during this state of flow that dancers don't have to think about the technique, but find themselves creating new zones of ballet art. This is what makes it all worthwhile. For dancers, the feeling of flow is the reward, and one important reason for struggling with seemingly endless hardships, practicing almost every day for decades, coping with pain from injuries, and in most cases remaining unknown. Again, vision drives ballet. When it comes to Irish dance, the Irish dance form, the sound of dance is a defining feature. The Irish dance show, Riverdance, attracted people from many different countries and cultures and races, as men as well as women in all kinds of ages and classes. This seems to have happened in large part because of the catching percussive beat that speeds up the pulse if you allow yourself to be drawn into it. But what really struck me as a dance scholar the first time I saw the show was the complete coordination of the group, this kind of togetherness, to get that many dancers in a long line to do the same steps in total unison is very difficult. Later, when I started talking to the dancers, they told me that the visual impression of perfect coordination was in fact partly technologically created by a manipulation of the sound. Sections of pre-recorded step sounds even out the sight of irregularities in the dancer's step. The sound is so loud that the eye doesn't catch mistakes. The dancers were grateful for this support sound, as it was called, saying that it made them feel safer. According to the composer Bill Whelan, when I interviewed him, support sound also made it easier to reach out in big theaters and arenas where they performed. This emphasis on step sound in Riverdance should be related to the importance of the sound of dance, the clicks, as it's called, in traditional Irish dancing, folk dance. Such dance is preferably performed on wooden stages in order to make the clicks louder. Sometimes at competitions, there are many dance competitions in Ireland. The music is turned down, so the adjudicators are able to listen to the dance. In order to produce the clicks, people used to take down a door and dance on in earlier times, both at competitions and at home in the backyard. Although this custom is sometimes said to have come about because the floors in the cottages were made of earth. to dance on the timber of emigrant ships on the way to America or Australia also produced good clicks. Like all coordinated rhythmic movements, this creates a sense of community. Importantly, it was Paul Stoller who first formulated an anthropology of the senses in the late 1980s with the taste of ethnographic themes. It drew on his sensorial experiences from the field, starting back in 1969, when he encountered the Republic of Niger, which was going to be his field site for decades to come. His initial reaction was, at first, Africa assailed my senses. I smelled and tasted ethnographic things and was both repelled by and attracted to a new spectrum of odors, flavors, sights, and sounds. In the long run, though, it was his many returns to the Songhay that, he explains, compelled me to tune my senses to the frequencies of Songhay sensibilities. He had to learn the language properly and make friends before understanding that Songhay uses senses other than sight to categorize their sociocultural experience. Eventually, he realized that taste and smell are crucial for social relations and that sound drives possession ceremonies and words in Songhay sorcery. Stoller even writes about the sound of words. Before wrapping up, what then is well-being? In his book, Life Within Limits, Well-being in a World of Want, Michael Jackson considers the notion of well-being not as a settled state, but as a field of struggle. He sees how this sense that well-being remains elusive, transitory, and unevenly distributed is felt by the rich as well as the poor and in all societies. While we tend to associate the senses with sensuality and thus well-being, this is a reminder that sensual experiences might also be painful or negative in other ways. This brings out the poignant point. Given that well-being is a state of bliss, we have to keep this shift between phases of pain and phases of pleasure in mind. Without pain, no pleasure. Without struggle, no well-being. This is where I end. The dance world, especially the ballet world, is infamous for rivalry. It is not the entire truth, though. For just like the haka in Niger, dancers care about each other. They depend on each other on stage, so there is actually a pronounced camaraderie. Working together in physical proximity creates bonds. Blogging in the Huffington Post about well-being in Niger as compared to well-being in the United States, Stoller notes, when I ask my Nigerian friends what is important, the invariable answer is the quality of our relations with others. In Niger, real wealth is measured not simply in a tally of possessions and goods, but in the number of carefully nurtured people in a person's network, which means that people take the time to talk to and know one another. So connecting to others and carefully nurturing people in one's network are indeed the heart of well-being, not only in Niger, but everywhere. And this is also what Paul Stoller does as a wonderful ethnographer, colleague, and friend. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have two more. We'll start with online with Gina Athena Ulysse. All right, you're here. Yep, she's here. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Wenive. Oh la la kua. Ma pe mande si pa gen gamuno. Oh la la kua. Ra-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Ra-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, facing north. Mwen rive. Oh la la kua. Ma pe mande si pa gen kamouno. Oh la la kua. Ra-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Ra-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Wanna be scatting, facing south. Wanna be scatting, facing east, facing west. Skipping beats without flow, a little off tempo, just a little off tempo. Gathering twigs, gathering scents, gathering sights. Zi mwen rive, mwen rive, mwen rive, mwen rive, mwen rive. O la mi tan la kua. Ma pe mande si pa gen gran mouno. O la kua. I've arrived in the courtyard and I am asking for the elders of the yard. I am asking for permission to enter. I am asking for permission to enter. I am asking for permission to enter. No longer afraid, no longer numb, no longer afraid of drowning. I'm standing right there in this liminality, somewhere in the in between, 14 degrees, 12, 25.6 north, 1 degree, 27.15 east, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Water flowing upstream somewhere in the bush. The water you cannot see insists on flowing upstream, defying notions of gravity. Water flowing upstream, seeking its own level. Did we forget to feed you again? Dis mwen rive, mwen rive, mwen rive, mwen rive. Chanting incantations, resonating, invading praise, poetry, the sound you cannot hear whispers wisdom of another kind. Class is in session again. Times have always been bad. Things fell apart so long ago, and the youth know. The youth have always known that, just for the record, just like M. Darcy knows, A is for anarchy. Dis mwen rive, mwen rive, mwen rive. O la mi tan la kua. Ma pe mande si pa gen gran mouno. O lan la kua. I cannot wait to see what you do when you get these shackles off, he once said to me. Because Gassemblage is now like abolition is now, that same old urgency of now, double takes between here and there, double take between here and now, and freedom was only yesterday and the yesteryears. You say you want a revolution. When we're still looking for the real, is liberation still possible under the ocean when in the beginning there was sound? In the beginning there was sound, blop, blop, blop. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, double dutching, free-flowing, whirling torpedoes, memos, mementos, rememories. Water seeks its own level. Water is rememory. Water as memory. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Did you forget to feed the spirits again? How do you measure density when caught up in new frequencies? Cook one piece of the snake for 7 days, somewhere in between linear time and all around time. Take us to the unconsciousness of consciousness, the consciousness of unconsciousness. Turn the volume way up. Turn the volume way up. Paul? Did I tell you I couldn't find the Bing at Sudan oil? I looked for it, but I couldn't find it. We found the raisin. We found all the other things you mentioned, but I couldn't find the oil. I keep asking myself, is that why those little vessels when we tried to bring them back? Is that why these celestial beings were pesting with forbidden pests according to US customs? Pesting, these little African pests were pesting. Those little Senegalese pests were pesting, reversing the Middle Passage, something about mumbo jumbo, something about ancestral imperatives. You ready? Dis-moi, rive, moi, rive, moi, rive, moi, rive. L'ami dans la cour, m'a demandé si pas gen kamouno, olan la cour. Contemplating the origins of immigrant seeds, reminder that embodiment is not primarily textural. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, trick or treat. Ra-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, trick or treat. From the gully to the river, tricking the tricksters in the bush, from the sea to the ocean and back to land again. Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Tony Cade had asked. Wellness is no trifling matter. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, new composition, geometric formulations. When writing, can you lose your way? Can you lose your way so you can find another way somewhere in the in-between? Because water is the teacher. Water is the teacher. When deep diving, can you take deep breaths? La-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. La-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Still looking for the elders. Trick or treat. Trick or treat, contemplating neo-Aguian principles to keep, accept, and know the present moment. You have to look straight ahead. Freedom is having no fear, Nina Simone once said. Freedom is having no fear. You ready? You activated? Don't forget to feed your spirits. Petite, Madame Jacqueline used to say. In between her slowest drags while she downloaded ancestral riffs, sliding between mother and colonial tongues, resisting that impulse to translate, S is for the invisible, the S that swirls, stuck somewhere in the in-between, stuck somewhere in the in-between. 1 + 1 = 3, 1 + 1 = 3, 1 + 1 = 3. Rassemblage was never meant to be secular. May the high spirits protect you. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Thank you. So Paul, I wish I was there in person. And I am sure I'll be talking with you sometime soon. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. That was great. Last but not least is Erica Walters. Paul and I felt we should have one of the former students' perspective here as well. So,
hi everyone. Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to everyone's talks and beautiful offerings today. So, yeah, do we have it?
yeah, sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. If it's a big deal, we don't have to do it. It's just some pictures.
Oh, you know what? I'm not.
Oh, that's something I said.
You know what? Forget it.
Okay, forget it. Okay. I just had some pictures, but I can just tell you about it. My name is Erica Walters, and my most relevant role today is as a former undergraduate student of Dr. Stoller. I graduated from Westchester University in 2016 with a bachelor's in anthropology. Westchester University is in Chester County, Pennsylvania, a famously beautiful county, less than an hour from Philadelphia. It's not a bad place to go to school and definitely not a good place to teach and live, as I'm sure Dr. Stoller would agree. But one of the main reasons I chose Westchester University for undergrad was not for its wonderful location, but for Dr. Paul Stoller. And I'm sure he would ask me to drop the formality of calling him doctor and professor, but this is what we called him in undergrad. So I'll ask you to forgive my nostalgia for this particular talk. I took his class, Magic, Religion, and Witchcraft, and another class that we just called theory when we were in school. I think it was like ethnological theory or something like that. But being in Dr. Stoller's class was like being in the coolest and strangest book club you could ever imagine. Each week, we read not only Dr. Stoller's work, but that of other anthropologists, folklorists, and authors who were all writing about magic. I remember students telling each other they absolutely had to take this class with the anthro professor who taught about healing, spirits, and the Songhai, and that it was unlike any other class at Westchester. The interest in Dr. Stoller and his courses renewed with each incoming batch of freshmen, despite his long tenure. Because Professor Stoller has been at Westchester University since 1979, in that time publishing more than 15 books, countless articles, and beloved blog posts. Having survived fieldwork in West Africa, cancer, and over 40 years of undergraduates misspelling the word anthropology, Dr. Stoller is a living proof that anthropologists are remarkably resilient. Of course, surviving undergraduates is a skill in of itself. I'm convinced one of the reasons Dr. Stoller is such a great storyteller is because he has spent 40 years hearing the incredible narratives of students making excuses as to why their paper is not done yet and they need an extension. He was a great sport the year we dressed up the statue of our school mascot, a ram, as Paul Stoller for Anthropology Day, complete with fun glasses and a scar. If patience were an academic discipline, Dr. Stoller would have tenured chairs named after him. In Stoller's classes, while we learned about spirit mediumship, we also learned about the power and importance of anthropologists as mediators. In Dr. Stoller's own words, anthropology is telling the stories of others so that we can understand human difference. The more we learn about how other people live, the more we know ourselves. This lesson was particularly important for me personally. I have an Indigenous mother from Oklahoma and a white father, and I, as I'm sure many others, was drawn to anthropology through questions of my own identity. The role of anthropologists as mediators was poignant enough for me that I now work as a liaison between tribal nations and the federal government on issues of cultural heritage, historic preservation, NAGPRA, and tourism. In that role, I've come to deeply appreciate Dr. Stoller's attitude that anthropological research should be considered in policymaking, a place where the voices of anthropologists are so often lacking, and it's more important now than ever, really. Despite only having 2 classes with Dr. Stoller, he was always happy to discuss my plans for graduate school or my research interests. And it was at the 2014 annual meetings in DC that he introduced me and other Westchester undergraduates to the extraordinary Dr. Edith Turner, a memory I'll cherish forever. Dr. Stoller's lessons continue to influence my life and work and those of many others. And this is a part of what made Dr. Stoller such an extraordinary presence at Westchester. As a scholar of West Africa, a researcher of sorcery, migration, and the textures of everyday life, he brought global anthropological conversations into a small Pennsylvania classroom. His storytelling didn't simply teach us about the world, it opened the world up to us. Students found themselves in dialogue with the Songhai, with traders and healers and migrants, whose stories Professor Stoller carried with respect and care. In a public university setting, especially, this experience was transformative. A lot of people in the classes are first-generation students, local kids who had never traveled far. But in his class, we traveled continents. This is why good professorship, true mentorship, deep scholarship, committed teaching is essential to the advancement of anthropology. Anthropology isn't just sustained through theories alone, it is sustained through teachers who can animate those theories and who model ethical engagement and show students how to think across difference with humility and rigor. Professors like Dr. Stoller create the next generation of scholars, advocates, policy thinkers, and bridge builders. They show us that anthropology is not only an academic discipline, but a way of seeing, one the world so desperately needs. Over his career, Dr. Stoller has taught over 1,500 people from a variety of majors and life paths. This is arguably his most important contribution, not only to anthropology, but to the world. Students in Dr. Stoller's classes were taught to engage with perspectives different from their own and to approach the world with compassion, reflexivity, and curiosity. These are lessons that extend far beyond the classroom. They influence careers, communities, and futures. Many people today have spoken about Dr. Stoller's remarkable contributions to the field and his extraordinary talent as a writer and storyteller. But I would like to highlight a few skills that those of us who had him as a professor witnessed closely. First is his time management. I'm convinced that this should be scientifically studied. While creating impactful work, publishing extensively, mentoring students, he was also available during office hours, present at university events, and just generally around. He's also adept at translating complexity into clarity. I somehow learned the nuances of French structuralism and practice theory through storytelling and examples that were actually funny and engaging. And he has the very rare talent of hearing the most ludicrous question from a student who's read exactly 0 of the assignments and responding with kindness and encouragement and somehow turning it into a teachable moment. Dr. Stoller taught us all to consider that magic is real. We learned about incantations, talismans, and divination, but by the end of the semester, evidenced by our own transformations, it became clear that the real magic was in Dr. Stoller's inimitable humility, enthusiasm, and spirit. The Westchester University of Anthropology and Archaeology, led by Michael D. Giovine, recently celebrated his life's work in an exhibit that ran through 2024. Students engaged with Dr. Stoller's work by curating and designing exhibit elements and even constructing a spirit hut inside of the museum. Fittingly, the students could embody the work through the sounds, smells, and slight physical labor of doing so, something I found very appropriate for an exhibit honoring Dr. Stoller. And the virtual exhibit is still available on the Westchester website. Please check it out if you're interested. So now I will share some words that other former students have asked me to read today. First is from Maddie Mulcahy. Dr. Stoller's classes confirmed my decision to major in anthropology and continue to impact my professional and personal life. Dr. Stoller changed how I see the world. I think about a comment he made about his own mentor quite often, that life was a great adventure. Dr. Stoller embodies what it means to live life like a great adventure and inspires me to approach my own journey with the same curiosity and spirit. Shane Metivier says, Professor Stoller has always inspired me to be self-reflective about my own experiences. Whenever I revisit his work, I feel a rekindling of my love of anthropology and the journey it has taken me on. His guidance in writing and storytelling is something I consider invaluable and a privilege to have experienced. His door was always open and his time was always available. Visiting his office was always an exploration of its own, from learning how to write in an academic but spirited style to exploring the mundane French sociological theories together. I still hate reading Bordeaux, by the way. Yes.
Who doesn't?
Yes. Professor Stoller has shaped who I am as a person and as an inspiring anthropologist. Not a day goes by I don't miss being in his classroom, and I am eternally grateful for all of the wisdom and guidance Professor Stoller has given me. And I will always hold those couple of years at university as some of the greatest memories I ever had, in a large part thanks to Paul Stoller. That's from Shane Metivier again. Foster Krupp writes, I am super grateful that I was able to take multiple classes with Dr. Stoller during my studies at Westchester. He is a storyteller, and that was an incredibly engaging way to learn anthropology. Dr. Stoller's ability to draw on his own experiences while teaching changed the way I see the world, and I will be forever grateful for that. So with that, I will say thank you, Dr. Stoller, for the numerous gifts you've given all of us, and especially for the most beautiful and often thankless gift of teaching. Through your work, your writing, and your mentorship, you've touched thousands of lives and helped us see the world and ourselves with clarity, wonder, and empathy. And for all of us who were lucky enough to be in your classroom, we left your courses knowing that while talismans and incantations are fascinating, The real magic is how one person can transform the lives of so many through teaching. Thank you all.
I know where your picture is. Let me pull it up. You sent it on a different email. Let's see Rami dressed up. Yeah.
We have to.
This is there it is. It'll go. It'll go. Yeah, there's yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's a scene from the exhibition. I think, Shane, did you make them read Bourdieu? Because I make them read Bourdieu.
I never.
I think Shane is mixing us up. Yeah. Well, did you want to, we have about 15 minutes left.
I'll take just a little bit of time. Maybe we can have time for a little discussion.
Yeah.
Take as long as you want. It's your day.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. So, Songhai people say at a moment like this, Aigama Kani. I mean, I'm feeling sweetness in this room. Feeling sweetness in this room. I was worried. I thought that Gina Ulysse was going to be the last person to speak, and no one ever wants to follow Gina. No, it's just beautiful invocations, encapsulating a lot of what has been said today in a very poetic and powerful way. Thank you, Gina, for your contribution. It made me want to say a text in Songhai, but I'll do it in English translation, about balance, something that Scott mentioned also. And that is when you have, you speak to the seven heavens, you speak to the north, you speak to the south, you speak to the east, you speak to the west. Gina was talking about this in a Haitian way. You speak to the seven heavens, you speak to the seven hells, and then you speak to Ndebi, who is the sort of Allah, the high spirit, and you hope that Ndebi hears your words, and Ndebi gives speech to the human beings and takes speech back from the human beings. It's hard to translate, but all of it is about creating balance and harmony in the world. And these are things that have been really at the forefront of my thinking in the past several years. I wanted to tell a very short narrative about surrounded by the spirits. And we think about spirits and the presence of spirits on the periphery of our consciousness usually. But let me just relate a short narrative that really sort of encapsulates the notion of surrounded by the spirits. I was at a spirit possession ceremony in Tillaberi, Niger, in the compound of my teacher, Adamu Jenitongo. And he called the spirit possession ceremony because the rain, as Scott was mentioning before, the rain had come late. So rain, if the rains come late, the harvest is compromised. And if the harvest is compromised, people will get sick, children will die. It's a very, very sort of tense moment. So he called a spirit possession ceremony to see, why was the rain being held up? And a hauka, a spirit that Conerly mentioned, a hauka comes in the body of a medium, and the medium, froths at the mouth, his eyes are blazing, and he comes over to me. I'm sitting, and he says, you're the white man. I said, yeah, that's me. I said, you have to take me to the bush. I have to find who is spoiling the rain. And I said, do you have a car? I said, no, I don't have a car. So he points to this, there was a functionary, and this functionary says, I've got a car. So we get into the car. It's a deux chevaux, which is a little bug of a car with a top that you can fold back. So the top is folded back. So the driver is driving on the left. The hauka spirit is going like this next to us, and I'm in the back seat with my teacher Adamu Jenitongo. And the spirit is standing up in the car, pointing, says, "Let's go," going this way. So we go into the bush, we're going along rutted roads. We get stuck in a wadi, in a dry riverbed. And finally, we come upon a tall termite hill. And the spirit says, stop, stop. And so we get out of the car and he goes over to the termite hill and he points to the base of the termite hill and he starts digging out some stuff. And eventually there is an antelope horn that has been buried inside the spirit hut, right? So we all laboriously pull it out, and inside are all sorts of amulets and other objects to, you know, sort of to stop, you know, to create a rain problem, because the rain was coming. This rain was coming, but when it reached Tillbury, the clouds would go to the left and the right, but they would not come into Tillbury, so farmers could not plant their crops. So Adamujenitongo gets out. He said, "We build a fire, and we're going to empty the contents, and we're going to empty the antelope horn into the fire to kill this rain stoppage curse." So we do that, and you know, and so I didn't expect anything to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen. And the next day I asked my teacher, I said, well, you know, the rain hasn't come yet. He said, just wait. And then 3 days later, the rain came. 4 days after that, the farmers went out and they came out and they planted their fields, and there was a pretty good harvest that year. The point is that, you know, you have to pay attention to these kinds of things, treat it seriously, because it can have very positive ramifications for everyone involved. So it's impossible for me. I don't know how to respond to all of these wonderful papers that covered so many different things, but they do. We've talked today about spirits. We've talked about the state of the world. We've talked about the craft of ethnography, right? And we've had an appreciation of the past. We've had an assessment of the present, and we have glimpses of the future. So Michael and Erica talk about, you know, I want to talk the importance of museums. This is something that we don't really talk about enough. What is public anthropology? Public anthropology is museums, right? More people come in contact with anthropological insight in museums than any other medium. Hundreds of thousands of people go to museums. They interact with, you know, things that anthropologists have discovered, and they can come away with it, hopefully, with a, you know, a new insight or a different appreciation for the world. The other major element of public anthropology is teaching, right? The teaching. More people come in contact with anthropological insight in the classroom than even more so than in museums. So those things, and I thank Erica and the other students for their beautiful words about my teaching. And so Conerly has talked about embodied fieldwork and Bori and the unexpected, which is very, very important. Scott talked about the difficulties of that Niger has faced because the bonds between the ancestors and people in the present have been severed. And when that happens, as Adamujenitongo used to say, the bush gets angry. When the bush gets angry, there's drought, there's floods, there's disease, there's death, there's social disarray. And so for him, the most important thing was to try to create a balance between social life and nature, between, he would say, the village and the bush. When that harmony is created, then there's vitality, there's viability. Sergio, who's just has completed a book manuscript, which is fantastic, had a beautiful sort of summarization of my work. Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to sleep around.
Oh, yeah, he's there. So between knowing and not knowing, and he's concerned with the issue of not knowing, which means not knowing anything. It means taking a position between things that enables you to see things and grasp things that you might not otherwise be able to do, right? Laurian talks about sensuous storytelling to convey much needed wisdom. the Kaya, the Kaya, the term comes from Songhai, Kaya, which means carry, right? So, and the opening of her new book, which I'll encourage you to order, it's fantastic, called Headstrong, is a beautiful story, a rival story that sort of frames the entire context of the book. It's beautifully rendered. David, my old friend, I hope he's still there. Yeah, David, my old friend. David is someone that I think everyone should read because his notions of social trust, his notion of his book, on the age of immunization and foreign bodies, is really something that speaks to the current moment. It really does speak to the current. He's interested in taking risks, and so so taking risks to, like Anna said, taking risks to through creative nonfiction, through reconfiguring our imagination to make the world a better place. I've already tried to talk about Gina. All I can say is I was wowed by Gina's invocations. And Fiona, thank you so much for just an absolutely beautiful poem, absolutely gorgeous. And I look forward to seeing, I wish I had more time. I would look forward to seeing you again in Dingle in April. And so ultimately, what all of this comes down to for me is what I call epistemic shock. Right? Epistemic shock. So epistemic shock is when something happens to you that you can't explain. Right? You can't explain it. So it may be something that is wondrous, maybe something, it's terrible, it may be hateful, it may be any number of things. So epistemic shock. And so you're dumbfounded by what you're seeing. So how do you deal with that? And the great philosopher Nietzsche said in his first book, the remedy the remedy for confronting epidemic shock is art. Art is the remedy, right? He has a beautiful line where he says that there are points when you reach epistemic shock where logic lifts up its tail and bites itself, right? And so epistemic shock is also Artaud, Antonin Artaud talked about the theater of cruelty. And so he would create images that are so shocking that it shook people from their sort of, eyes wide shut state to understand things differently, to take risks, et cetera, et cetera. So, Napier is also talking about this notion of that we live with our eyes wide shut, the loss of social trust. And what is the role of scholars in all of this stuff with, surrounded by the spirits, all the things that everyone has so beautifully talked about? What is our role? What is the remedy of art? Perhaps it is to take risks to heal the discipline and to help treat the wounds of the world. And so how do we do that? I ask the question. I don't know if we have time for discussion, but something to think about. How we move forward, given that the state of the world is so screwed up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks for everyone. I know it's late in Europe. What time? Well, we have 2 minutes of discussion. Can't believe we made it, actually. Does anybody, or anybody want to in the audience who weren't panelists that want to say anything about Paul or?
Yes, I just want to say something very, very quick. Like we can't wait for Paul's new book that I hope it will come out soon next year. Yeah, I have heard about it. I hope it will be out soon. No, it's amazing.
I'd like just to say that the scope of papers presented is a testament to Paul's imagination and his bravery, and to the friendship that we've all shared with him, for which I know we're all deeply grateful. Thanks, Paul.
And again, please, like Erica, thanks for pitching. If you want to see, you know, our exhibition, it's a nice virtual exhibition. You can always look at it. There's also some papers, something from Paul, some other talks. Scott's had a talk over there, and then all these oral histories that a history student did with Paul, little snippets as well. So it's kind of a rich website, so you could do that. It's wcupa.edu/surrounded by the spirits. Who knows? Maybe we'll splice this and put it up or something. I don't know, but well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thanks. No. All right. Well, thanks. I'm gonna turn off the Zoom. Thank you. It was great seeing you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Oh, everyone's waving to you guys.
Bye, everyone. Wish I were there.
Bye,
Have a great time this evening. Bye.
Thank you too. Have a great time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.